Chapter 1185. Xianxia's continued growth and economic development, especially after defeating the Beiming army and the world of Wara, made the small Mongolian tribes see the rise of a powerful five-star army, a new force. They could only look up to the five-star army and didn't dare to have the slightest disrespect. After knowing that the order was personally given by Bugnam of Gojoseon, no one dared to refuse. They all said that they would obey the military order, and some even directly said that they wanted to join the five-star army. In their opinion, finding a strong backer would be more beneficial to their tribe's future development. For those who wanted to rely on him, Yang Qindong didn't have no choice but to accept all of them. He asked Yang Heir to investigate carefully and make sure that their strength could play a role before accepting them. On the contrary, some of the small tribe leaders who had their own plans were already dead in Yang Qindong's heart. For the future generations, he wouldn't allow other armed forces to exist under his rule. Even if they were to rely on him, he wouldn't allow them to join the five-star army. He also had to disrupt their original organization, which meant that he had to completely eat them up. In the future, people who joined him and rebelled often happened, and it happened more than once. It also caused a lot of headaches for those who thought that they were broad-minded. Yang Qindong didn't want to make this kind of mistake again. Either they were completely used by the five-star army, or they were completely destroyed. There was no third choice. Of course, this wasn't something that could be done just by saying it. If he wanted to do this, it would take a long time. What Yang Qindong needed to do was to shorten this process as much as possible and completely unify the entire Mongolian grassland. After meeting the generals and assigning them their respective tasks, the last person Yang Qindong met was the captured Beiming general, or more precisely the businessman, Rong Xiao. This businessman who used the commercial resources of the five-star army and relied on his identity as a Han to make a fortune. Now, he actually used the money he earned from the five-star army to deal with the five-star army. With this kind of two-faced character, Yang Qindong couldn't tolerate him. He had to kill him as an example to those who had bad intentions. Rong Xiao, who was tied up, was like a fat pig that was about to be slaughtered. He was tied to a piece of wood and carried into the tent. As he entered, a fishy stench spread throughout the tent. Beta Persei, who was standing on the side, wrinkled his nose, asked with an unhappy expression, "What's going on? Did you throw him into a cesspool?" Second brother, "No, he was so scared that he peed and pooped. I just gave him a simple wash, but I didn't expect him to pee again." Longwei's captain, Ba Daojiang, who was responsible for bringing him in, said with a face full of disdain, "Humph. You dare to make an enemy out of our five-star army with just this little bit of ability?" Knowing that this was all because Rong Xiao was too cowardly, Yang Heir snorted unhappily. Yang Qindong's expression was normal. In the past, in order to complete a mission, he had come into contact with all kinds of environments. It was just some strange smells. It really didn't make him feel any discomfort. He first looked at Rong Xiao, who had fainted from fright, and nodded. "Come, wake him up." Splash! A large bucket of cold water was then handed over to Rong Xiao. A wave of coldness directly stimulated him, causing him to struggle and shout loudly. "Ah! Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'm willing to surrender to the five-star army. I'm willing to serve the grandfathers of the five-star army." Rong Xiao really didn't have a backbone. If it was said that he was tortured by Longwei for a period of time, he was already scared out of his wits at this moment, and he couldn't help but shout when he woke up. After shouting for a while, he found that no one was paying attention to him. Only then did he have the courage to open his eyes and look at the surroundings. He saw Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Qindong, sitting at the head of the tent, wearing a golden robe. "Ah! Bugnam of Gojoseon." Rong Xiao, who was once met by Yang Qindong because he was a businessman, immediately recognized Bugnam of Gojoseon's identity, and his eyes flashed with panic and surprise. Speaking of which, he felt sorry for Bugnam. Now that Bugnam of Gojoseon had found him, he was not afraid. But he believed even more that the King of Hell was easy to meet, and the little devils were hard to deal with. Compared to those Longwei who used various means to deal with him, he believed that Yang Qindong should be easier to talk to, because people with such an identity would not take him seriously. As long as the other party was happy, he might be let go like a fart. Thinking of this, Rong Xiao, who was lying on the ground, suddenly got up and came to a place 5 meters in front of Yang Qindong at a fast speed. He kowtowed to the ground. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, I was wrong. Please be magnanimous and spare my life. I promise that the Rong family will completely obey your orders in the future and work for the 5-star army. I will be your dog in the future, and I will bite whoever you ask me to. By the way, our Rong family has been doing business for generations, and we have a lot of connections in Beiming. If you want to do something, we will definitely do it well and won't let you down. I only ask that you spare my life to show your magnanimity and magnanimity. I believe that many people will join you. Rong Xiao deserved to be a businessman. When he said these words, he didn't even stutter. It was as if these words had been rehearsed by him many times in his heart. The Rong family had indeed been doing business for generations. They had experienced being looked down upon by others at the beginning, and now they had a wide influence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been conferred the title of general and could lead 100,000 soldiers just because they had done one thing. It was a good thing for the 5-star army and Yang Chendong to have such a congenial person. With them around, he would be able to gain a better understanding of the Northern Ming dynasty. Or if it was another person, he would nod and agree. Unfortunately, he met Yang Chendong. It was because of Rong Xiao that the new Second Army had experienced a tragedy. Even among the captives in the Battle of the First City, many people who were originally from the new Second Army had been captured. Some of them had really betrayed Beiming, while some of them hadn't. It was just that the environment had forced them to work hard for Beiming in order to survive. It was because of Rong Xiao that the commander and the others had experienced a humiliation that they would never forget in their lives. This kind of approach was often more uncomfortable than killing them. If it weren't for Yang Chendong's enough trust in the commander, he and the entire new Second Army would not have a good ending. It was because of Rong Xiao that the 100,000 people in Shaojing City and Jingzhou City had not seen the sun for several months. The happy smile on their faces in the past had disappeared. Instead, they were living like walking corpses. No one wanted to experience the feeling of going from heaven to hell again. It was because of Rong Xiao that the guard captain Wuxia had to die to show his loyalty. Such a loyal person who protected his master was killed by this villain in front of him. It was because of Rong Xiao that the two cities had to temporarily rely on Beiming in order to survive. Because of this, Beiming in the War of Wara had no scruples and could besiege the first city. So many good soldiers had died tragically. It was because of Rong Xiao. There were many more that Yang Chendong didn't want to say or think about. And all of this was because of Rong Xiao's personal reasons. In the face of such a person who could be said to have committed a heinous crime, even if there was a flower in the sky, how could he forgive him? Compared to the benefits of getting along well with the Rong family, if Rong Xiao didn't die, how many people would be disappointed? How could he face the heroes who died in the defense of the first city and the soldiers of the new Second Army? Rong Xiao must die. This was the ending that no one could change, but he shouldn't die here, but in Shaojing City. It should be handled by Beiming and the others. Take him down and send him to the new Second Army. It's okay as long as he doesn't die in the process. These words had already represented Rong Xiao's ending. There was even a hidden meaning in the words, that was, he would let everyone torture Rong Xiao along the way, as long as Rong Xiao didn't die. It was best to let him suffer a fate worse than death, and let him know what would happen if he offended the 5-star army. It was almost time, and Yang Chendong was ready to set off with the army. In contrast, the Wara had run for several hours. Although Tianhu and the others had already chased after them, they were alone and didn't bring enough money and food, so they couldn't be at ease. Order the new 1st Army Reconnaissance Regiment to be the left vanguard, responsible for the safety of the left wing. Order the new 1st Army Light Cavalry Regiment to be the right vanguard, responsible for the safety of the right wing. Order the 20,000 Mongolian troops led by Nari Song and the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Dai Qua, to be the middle. Order the 4th Army Division to be the rear, escorting the army's money and food. Set off. In the big tent, Yang Chendong shook his arm and shouted. More than 50,000 troops went south from the first city. Looking at the back of the army, the new 1st Army commander, Tiger's Mane, was filled with emotion. The 5-star army has completely grown up. Yes, but our future mission is still a long way to go. Yu Mian, the lord of the first city, also sighed. Haha, don't be emotional at this time. We still have too many things to do. Reorganizing the captive army and preparing to receive the new supplies, we still need the cooperation of the army commander and the lord of the first army. Xianxia chuckled, looking quite proud. It was no wonder that he was so happy. More than 70,000 Walla cavalry, more than 90,000 Beiming infantrymen, and nearly 70,000 infantrymen from Shi Huanshan's headquarters. This was more than 200,000 troops, and now they all needed to be reorganized. This task mostly fell on him, the logistics division commander. Although the task was heavy, he was very happy. With so many troops, he could do a lot of things in the future. Don't worry, we will fully support you if you need anything, Yu Mian also said with a smile. But at the same time, he didn't forget to put forward a condition. It's just that the inner and outer walls of the first city have been damaged in this battle. With so many laborers, can Division Commander Xianxia help me? That's not a problem. We don't have anything else now, but we have people. Ha! Xianxia laughed. At this moment, not only him, but Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian also laughed together. Chapter 1186. Compared to the joy of the new army, at this time, Shi Hang was leading the army to strengthen the defense of Tulu City. In the battle outside the beginning city, the Beiming army was defeated and retreated. Rong Xiao's 100,000 troops were all captured by the Five-Star Army. Not only that, he just received news that Shaojing and Jingzhou City were once again controlled by the Five-Star Army's new Second Army and returned to the embrace of Bugnam of Gojoseon. All kinds of unfavorable news came, and Shi Heng's face became very ugly. He already knew that this attack on the grasslands had ended in failure. He didn't dare to imagine what kind of reaction the emperor would have once he knew this news. What he had to do now was to mend the pen after the sheep were lost and find someone to take the blame. Shi Heng's earliest preparation was to let Sun Guang, who retreated first, take the blame. For this reason, he also ordered Sun Guang, who retreated to Tulu City, to be arrested. Now he was in the dungeon's interrogation room. He hoped that he could use his words to persuade the other party to take all the blame. This way, his responsibility as the commander would be reduced by a lot. In order to strengthen his power, Shi Heng also invited Fang Dingshan over. The two of them interrogated one person together, which was enough to give Sun Guang face. Bring people to commit the crime, Shi Heng said with some momentum as he slammed the wooden block on the desk. Bring people to commit. Wei. Wu. The group of Yamen runners standing on both sides also shouted loudly, raising the tense atmosphere to the extreme. In the midst of the shouting, Sun Guang, shackled, walked into the hall under the protection of two bailiffs. Although he was still far away, the clattering sound could be heard. The shouts continued, as if to create an extremely tense atmosphere. Shi Heng, who was sitting behind the desk, was already waiting to see Sun Guang's current appearance. Sun Guang's face would definitely turn pale, and he would kneel down and beg for mercy the moment he saw him. If that was the case, wouldn't Sun Guang have to say whatever he wanted him to say? The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Sun Guang finally appeared, but he did not show the slightest sign of fear. Instead, he looked lazy and sleepy. When he saw Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan, he even yawned and said with a smile, "Sigh, even if I caught the wrong person, I shouldn't have let Marquis and General Fang come here personally. I'm really flattered." He did not seem to be afraid at all. On the contrary, he was so calm. In the eyes of Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan, they were surprised. The two of them first looked at each other. After confirming that the person who came was Sun Guang, Shi Heng suddenly picked up the wooden block and said, "Sun Guang, don't pretend to be crazy here. Marquis is asking you, do you know your crime?" The sound of the wooden block reverberated in the interrogation room. It was quite imposing. However, this was nothing to Sun Guang, who was like a hob. He could even laugh and said, "Crime? What crime have I committed?" "You." Shi Heng was really angered by Sun Guang's shameless behavior. He pointed at him and said, "You led the troops to retreat without a military order, which led to our defeat in the Battle of Beginning City. Isn't this enough to sentence you to death?" "What? Is there such a thing?" Sun Guang said with an obedient look. "What? You dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it? Deputy Commander Sun, this is not what a man should do." Fang Dingshan, the deputy judge at the side, finally spoke. He could not stand the kind of generals who fled in the face of battle. They were obviously not very capable, but they were in a high position. Such people were like vermin and were really hateful. Facing Fang Dingshan's interrogation, Sun Guang was also not anxious. "General Fang, who are you talking about? From what I know, When faced with the charge of the 5-star army, you didn't even fire a single arrow before retreating. Could it be that your actions are what a man should do? At this moment, Fong Dingshan's face flushed red. He was actually being questioned in return. He was not as thick-skinned as Sun Guang, who could be indifferent in the face of questioning. Although he was greedy for money, he also cherished his reputation. He immediately said angrily, "Bullshit." The reason why the Liaodong cavalry retreated was because Admiral Shi gave a military order. We followed the order and also to preserve the strength of our Baiming army. If that's the case, then I also retreated to preserve my strength. Sun Guang was good with words and directly used the other party's reason to explain his actions. This is not the same. Fong Dingshan said angrily. I retreated because I received the Admiral's order. You didn't. You think I didn't do it just because you said so? Ask Marquis. Didn't you give me the order to retreat first? Sun Guang ignored Fong Dingshan and looked at Shi Heng, who was sitting on the other side. The situation is like this. When the Admiral saw that Rong Xiao, who was the vanguard, didn't know how to command and fight, and was the first to escape, he relied on his many years of experience on the battlefield. In order to preserve more strength, he immediately gave the order for the entire army to retreat. It was under this order that our Great Tong Army and General Fong's Liaodong cavalry took the opportunity to retreat back to Tulu City. This sealed off the 5-star army's entrance to Baiming, and at the same time preserved the strength of the army. In this battle, Marquis's command wasn't wrong. The mistake was Shi Wanshan's betrayal, the Wara's escape, and Rong Xiao's cowardice. This made the opportunity to severely damage the 5-star army, and even capture Bugnam of Gojoseon go to waste. There was no mistake in the command and preparation of this battle. Marquis and General Feng, was that not the case? As if he was telling a story, Sun Guang's words were full of chapters and chapters as he narrated the entire story. Shi Heng and Fong Dingshan were stunned when they heard this. If they didn't experience it themselves, they would also think that this was what happened. Without waiting for the two to react, Sun Guang continued. Of course, if the two of you insist that I am guilty, then there is another explanation. Admiral Shi didn't know how to maintain a good relationship between the two armies, so the Wara suddenly retreated at a critical moment. Admiral Shi and Fong Dingshan saw that the situation was going to change, so in order to protect their own lives, they forced Rong Xiao to lead 100,000 soldiers to their deaths. Only Vice General Sun Guang saw the problem, but because they had been besieging the city for many days, their strength was limited, so in order to preserve the strength of the army, they had no choice but to retreat first. Unfortunately, in order to cover up the truth, Admiral Shi killed all the witnesses and pushed all the blame to Sun Guang. In the blink of an eye, it was a completely different explanation. After saying this, Sun Guang intentionally shrugged and said, Right, I've already written a memorial for the second explanation. As long as I don't leave this place today, someone will send it to Baiming. When the time comes, His Majesty will definitely see it. Perhaps he won't believe it, or perhaps he will. In that case, everything will be up to the heavens. Naturally, the choice is still in the hands of the two of you. Do as you see fit. At this moment, Sun Guang was extremely relaxed. He didn't seem like a criminal at all. On the contrary, he seemed more like an interrogator. The second explanation was like a heavy hammer to Shi Heng and Fong Dingshan's heads. The two of them couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Only now did they realize that they had somewhat underestimated this Sun Guang in the past. It turned out that this was a smart person. They didn't know that everything Sun Guang did was the idea given to him by Su Dei. And this idea came from Yang Chendong. No wonder Shi Heng and Fong Dingshan were stunned. In this battle, Su Dei originally wanted to take the opportunity to return to the embrace of the 5-star army. He was even confident that he could capture Sun Guang and make a great contribution. However, this was not what Yang Chendong wanted. A good-for-nothing general like Sun Guang would not be an obstacle to Yang Chendong's unification of the world. On the contrary, having such a person Baiming would only be beneficial and not harmful to him. Once he captured him, not only would he not be able to severely damage the strength of the Baiming army, but he would also help the other party to eliminate villains. Why would Yang Chendong do that? As for Su Dei, he played an unparalleled role in the battle outside the beginning city. It was better for such a person to continue to stay in the Baiming army. At least now was not the time for him to come to the 5-star army. Of course, Yang Chendong would remember all these contributions in his heart. Once he returned one day, he would definitely give them a position that he was satisfied with. Having said that, Sun Guang's two statements entered the ears of the two generals. As long as one was not stupid, one would naturally know how to choose. Although there was a hint of being threatened, whether it was Shi Hang or Fang Dingshan, they were the kind of people who cared about their reputation. They absolutely did not want to have a scandal, let alone lose the imperial favor. In the end, the two looked at each other and laughed. Then, Shi Hang said, Deputy Commander Sun is indeed a pillar of the country. It seems that everything is really a misunderstanding. Come, quickly remove the shackles. Sun Guang was released just like that. The explanation to the outside world was that his withdrawal was originally approved by the admiral. It was just that he withdrew too quickly, so it caused a misunderstanding. Following that, Sun Guang's first statement was written into a memorial to the emperor and reported to the Daizong emperor. The 50,000 cavalrymen of Walla were like a black whirlwind on the grassland, heading straight towards Shaojing City. At the most critical moment, Yes Hen was the first to withdraw his troops. He did not dare to gamble. He did not dare to believe in his ally, the Baiming army, which led to a great defeat outside the beginning city. Of course, the Baiming army was defeated. They lost 100,000 troops. For Yes Hen, it was just some provisions that could not be taken away because he was in a hurry. When he returned to Hanoi and gathered his general, Bo Muir, provisions would not be a problem. Leader, the fast horse scouts reported that the 5-star army is still chasing us 50 miles behind us. They have not given up. General Chao Lu rode to Yeshen's side and reported in a hurry. Chapter 1187. They're still chasing? How many people do they have? Yeshen's face flashed with anger. He had already been defeated, but he was still the first army to retreat. This was giving enough face to the 5-star army. Moreover, when he attacked the beginning city, he didn't use a single soldier, saber, or sword. On the contrary, he even lost 100,000 soldiers when he attacked North Desert City. No matter how he looked at it, he was the one who suffered a loss. Why was the 5-star army so tightly holding on to him and not letting him go? Replying to the leader, they have about 50,000 people. They have more people than us. Among them, there is also the existence of the most elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division. When Chao Lu answered these questions, he felt a chill down his spine. Unlike Baiming and Southern Ming, where most of the soldiers were infantry, the 1st Cavalry Division was in the limelight in the grasslands where the majority of the soldiers were cavalry. It was not something that other tribes and forces could compare to. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. For many people in the grasslands, the 1st Cavalry Division represented a destructive existence. Continue to retreat. When he heard that the other side had more people than him, and that there was the existence of the invincible elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division, Yes Hen lost the desire to compete. He helplessly shook his head and gave the order to continue the retreat. Reporting. Just as Yes Hen gave the order, the fast horse scout in front of him came in front of him again. Reporting to the leader, there is a group of cavalry with a banner of the 5-star army 30 miles in front of us. They are blocking our way. There is a 5-star army cavalry in front of us? Yes Hen was shocked by this news. Leader, it should be the 5-star army's new 2nd army. Chao Lu thought of something and whispered to Yes Hen. Slapping his forehead, Yes Hen nodded. That's right, it should be them. Humph, the useless Baiming. After conquering 2 cities, don't they know how to completely destroy the new 2nd army? Now, they've become popular again. Yes, the Baiming army is too incompetent. But Chief, now that they are targeting us, what should we do? Chao Lu was also complaining about the incompetence of the Baiming army. But now was not the time to complain. Instead, he had to face the problem. What else can we do? Let's split up and meet the enemy. The rest of the cavalry will circle around them and rush back to Hanoi. Helplessly, he said. In the past, if a mere new 2nd army dared to stop 50,000 elite cavalrymen from Wara, Yes Hen would definitely teach them a lesson. But now, he couldn't take such a risk. Once his main force was entangled with the enemy, the 5-star army cavalry would catch up to him. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. This was to strengthen the soil and break the wrist. Chao Lu asked carefully, Chief, How many people should we send to meet the enemy? Everyone knew that the cavalrymen sent to meet the new second army would never return. But the number of people was the key. If there were too few, it wouldn't be effective. If there were too many, the losses would be too great. It was not a good choice. Send 20,000 soldiers. After all, the new second army's strength is greatly damaged. If we send more people, they might be able to rush out and meet up with us in Hanoi. Yes, Hen was indeed an ambitious person. Without even thinking about it, he betrayed all 20,000 of his men. The so-called sending more people to defeat the new second army was just an excuse. In the end, Yes Hen was afraid that if he sent too few people, they wouldn't be able to entangle the new second army and affect his escape plan. Chao Lu was naturally aware of this point. But this was the chief's order, so he had to carry it out. He immediately agreed and went to make the arrangements. We'll leave from the sides, Yes Hen said with heartache. When they came with 150,000 soldiers. But when they returned, they only had 30,000 men and horses. They even lost their provisions. This was an undeniable defeat. In front of the small yellow river in front of Jianghu city, the new second army was laying in ambush here, waiting for the Wara Wara cavalrymen to escape here. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill them. Report. General, the Wara cavalry has split up. 30,000 of them left from the flanks. About 20,000 of them are heading straight for us. The scout in charge of scouting turned back and reported to the general standing in front of the army. Understood. Spy nodded with a solemn expression. Obviously, this situation was completely within his expectations. The enemy has split up, so the pressure on us has decreased a lot. Now we're only dealing with 20,000 cavalrymen. Everyone must cheer up and show the might of the new second army. Yes. Kong Ji and the other two division commanders replied loudly. In fact, even if there were 20,000 Walla cavalry, it would still be a huge pressure for the new second army. After going through so many things, the new second army was now short of an infantry division, and the other three divisions were not complete. At most, there were only 18,000 soldiers. Moreover, the number of horses in the army was not enough. Many of the original cavalrymen had to be converted to infantry because of the lack of horses. Kong Ji looked at his subordinates who were supposed to have more than 8,000 cavalrymen, but now there were only about 4,000 cavalrymen and 2,000 infantry. He couldn't help but curse. It's all because of those damn Baiming. They stole our horses. Otherwise, with the strength of the new second army, it would be easy to deal with 20,000 cavalrymen. Okay, Mr. Kong, don't complain. Save some strength to deal with the enemy. Go and check on the preparation of the bows and arrows. She understood Kong Ji's frustration. How could he not be the same? However, this was a war. It was not a war where two people could curse each other. It was not a war where one could win by talking. Although Su Yuan betrayed the five-star army and ended up with his corpse, he still did some good things. For example, a large number of military supplies were stored in Jianghu city. Among them, bows and caltrops were the most abundant. Considering that the most likely enemy on the grassland was the cavalrymen, the Baiming army was well prepared. Because the Baiming army was mainly attacking the beginning city this time, many of the equipment that was used to deal with the cavalrymen were temporarily not used. They were left in the city. This time, the new second army benefited. Commander, don't worry. The bows and arrows are ready. We also prepared 400 meters of caltrops. I guarantee that the enemy's cavalrymen will suffer heavy losses. Kong Ji's face was full of confidence when he said this. Good. This is a turnaround for the five-star army. Although we were forced to do what we did before, it is inevitable that some of our brothers will have some opinions about us. Now is the time to prove everything with actions. There must not be any problems. She nodded heavily and said. Now, everything was ready. They only lacked the east wind. 4 hours later, the east wind, which was the enemy, appeared. Looking from afar, it was as if they covered the sky and the earth. People said that there were more than 10,000 soldiers. When 20,000 cavalrymen came from afar, the battle formation could not be described with words. Prepare for battle. Archers, get ready. Kong Ji, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, rode on his horse and shouted loudly. There were 6,000 archers in the 3 divisions. They were waiting for the enemy to arrive at the designated location so that they could launch a fatal attack. The earth shook, and shouts shook the sky. 20,000 elite cavalrymen of the Walla Empire came from afar, shouting slogans that only the people of the grassland could understand. When the distance between them was still 800 meters, they began to perform all kinds of equestrian tactical movements. They either hid their bodies on the side of the warhorse, or bent their bodies over the horse to minimize the area of their exposed body parts. Or they knocked their bows and arrows and prepared to launch a counterattack on the horse. This was an evenly matched battle. There were no tricks to be played. The reason why it was said to be evenly matched was because the Walla cavalry had the advantage in terms of numbers. It was just that they had limited time to fight. If it wasn't for the fact that the elite cavalry of the 5-star army were rushing over, the 20,000 Walla cavalry would not have used such a method of charging. Instead, they would have attacked from the left, middle and right. Only then would they be able to maximize their advantage in numbers. However, time did not allow for it. They had no choice but to use the wolf pack tactic. The so-called wolf pack tactic could also be called a swarm. It was like a pack of wolves. Once they saw the target, they would tear it into pieces and finally complete the mission of killing and defeating the enemy. It could be said that the ancient cavalry battles were very dangerous. It was about the coordination of tactics, the advantage in numbers, and the use of geographical and weather conditions. Of course, the morale of the two armies and the weapons used would also directly affect the final result of the battle. As for the battle between the two armies, it was almost impossible for both sides to fight. Unless it was under special circumstances, neither side would choose to do so. It was very difficult to train a general. It required a lot of resources and time. How could they sacrifice themselves in a battle like this? This was just something that movies and TV dramas did on purpose. The 20,000 Walla army's cavalrymen were approaching step by step, and their speed was very fast. Their forces were also very scattered. It gave people a feeling that they did not know where to start. It was as if the attack was not the main point, and the attack was the main point. This was the essence of the wolfpack tactic. It made the opponent confused and could only choose to attack. In this way, if they did not deal with it well, they could be defeated like a mountain. The reason why the Walla cavalry chose to attack like this was because they had the advantage in numbers. They were thinking of ways to expand their advantage and achieve the military goal of winning the battle. Archers. Scatter. 300 in a squadron, 100 in a small squad. Adopt a stacked attack. Kong Ji was not someone to be trifled with. Seeing that the opponent was about to expand their advantage in numbers, he was not willing to let it go. He immediately adopted the corresponding countermeasures. Chapter 1188. After the order was given, the 6,000 archers were divided into 20 formations. Each formation had 300 archers, and 100 archers would fire at the same time. After the first row fired their arrows, the second row, then the third row, and the first row readied themselves. The cycle repeated itself to achieve the goal of constantly firing arrows. By the time the archers' formation had completely dispersed, the Wa-Al cavalry was less than 5 li away. At this moment, Shi Bi's eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He wanted to see the iron caltrops display their might. Charge! Kill! Kill these lambs! Ha ha ha! The battle cries were still coming from all directions. The distance between the two groups increased from 500 meters to 450 meters, then 430 meters, 410 meters, 400 meters. Finally, they arrived at the battlefield of the iron caltrops. The sound of horses falling to the ground could be heard. The caltrops had 6 horns, so they could stand upright no matter where they were thrown. They were also very sharp. Once the caltrops hit a horse's foot, it could be pierced through even if the horse was hit by an iron palm. This was the advantage and power of the caltrops. The Walla cavalry did not expect the new Second Army to use this tactic. In their opinion, this attack was simply a rash move by the new Second Army. They shouldn't have made more preparations. Otherwise, they wouldn't have adopted the tactic of charging at the beginning. At least, they should have sent some people to test the waters first. They did not expect the Walla cavalry to be hit by the caltrops. None of the Walla cavalry in the front could dodge the caltrops. A short distance of 100 meters was enough to knock down 2,000 Walla cavalry. The momentum of their charge was also halted. The caltrops were limited. In the era when iron was precious, The caltrops were very expensive. Even Bai Ming did not prepare a lot of them. The caltrops could only cover a distance of 100 meters. After this distance, the Walla cavalry adjusted their posture and started to charge again. When they were about 200 meters ahead and had just picked up their speed, the arrows came from afar. Like a dense rain of attacks, Division Commander Kong Ji gave the order to release the word, fire. Ding ding dang dang dang. The arrows flew through the air for over 100 meters before landing on the bodies of the cavalrymen or their war horses. In an instant, there was another scene of men and horses being thrown off their feet. At least 1,000 cavalrymen fell to the ground from the arrows. Cavalry, get ready. Seeing that the two waves of preparation had the effect of injuring and obstructing the enemy, Kong Ji's heroic spirit soared. After a shout, he pulled out the sharp saber on his body. Tip of the arrow, charge at the enemy formation. Archers, use protective fire. Charge. Kong Ji, who was issuing military orders, was the first to rush out of the battle formation. This also meant that the new Second Army's counterattack had officially begun. Relying on the caltrops and archers to obstruct the enemy, they effectively suppressed the Walla cavalry's advance. Kong Ji gave the order to launch an all-out attack. It could be said that he grasped the timing very well. Seeing all this, Songbi nodded in satisfaction. Songbi clenched his fists tightly because he knew that what happened just now was just a small trick. The real battle and bitter battle had just begun. In a chaotic battle like this, there were very few true winners. The only difference was which side would suffer less losses. Songbi clenched his fists tightly. His face was tense. In a battle like this, being a bystander was far less relaxing than slaughtering his way into the battle. At the very least, he didn't have to think so much when he entered the battlefield. All he had to do was to continuously kill the enemy and prevent himself from being killed. However, Yang Chendong had already set the rules for the 5-star army. In such a chaotic battle, the high-ranking officers were not allowed to participate personally. This time, Kong Ji was able to personally participate because the morale of the new Second Army had suffered a huge blow. Now that they urgently needed a leader, Commander Kong Ji rushed out. Otherwise, even he would have to stand outside the battlefield and watch everything from a bystander's point of view. The cruel battle had begun. Weapons clashed against weapons, warhorses clashed against warhorses, and humans clashed against each other. From time to time, there would be arrows falling into the battlefield. At this moment, no one could guarantee that the arrows wouldn't kill the enemy and harm the soldiers. At most, the probability of it happening would be lower. Therefore, on the battlefield, there were many cavalrymen who died in the hands of their own archers. However, this didn't stop the archers from continuing to shoot arrows. After all, even if the arrows were used as support, the number of arrows would still be higher. This was a battle where there were no winners. In a chaotic battle, individual strength played a huge role. Luck also played a huge role in winning and losing. For example, many cavalrymen who went berserk would hurt their own soldiers from time to time. In such a chaotic battle, even if you had the ability to fight against 100 people, you might not be able to escape death. Unless it was a high-ranking officer like Kong Ji, there would be dozens or even hundreds of soldiers following him wherever he went. At least they could provide some protection. War was cruel. The cavalrymen fought back and forth. From time to time, there would be people who were knocked off their war horses. However, this didn't mean that they lost their ability to fight. On the contrary, there were more and more people who dismounted to fight. This made it so that sometimes, not only did they have to guard against being on horseback, they also had to guard against ambushes from below. Perhaps when they were swinging their swords at the enemy, the warhorse's hooves would be chopped off. Then, they would lose their balance and fall off the horse. If they weren't prepared, perhaps the moment they fell off the horse, there would already be a large sword floating above their head. And it was precisely this kind of chaotic battle that lasted for nearly an hour. In the end, there was no clear winner. Finally, it was announced that the Walla cavalry had left. Worried that the 5-star army behind them would catch up, the 20,000 Walla cavalry didn't make any more moves. They only charged blindly. After charging through the new Second Army's defensive line, they left. As for those who didn't charge through, they were either killed or taken captive. 2 hours later, both sides had paid a heavy price and the battle was coming to an end. Kong Ji, who was covered in blood, whether it was his own or the enemy's, rode to Xibei. He first gave a standard military salute and then said with a smile, "Military commander, the battle is over. According to the preliminary statistics, we killed more than 4,000 enemies and captured more than 10,000 enemies. Only 5,000 of the enemy's cavalry managed to escape. We lost more than 2,000 people and 5,000 injured." After saying this, Kong Ji's left arm suddenly bled a lot. This was the mark left by the Walla cavalry's scimitar. Haha, I wasn't paying attention and was stared at by mosquitoes. Regarding this, Kong Ji said with a look of indifference, "Good, this battle was very good. We showed the spirit of our new second army. Come, bandage Mr. Kong's wound. Everyone else, clean up the battlefield." Seeing that the blood was still flowing and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping, Shibi hurriedly shouted. Kong Ji went to rest, leaving behind many soldiers to clean up the battlefield. About an hour later, a large number of 5-star army cavalry came from the distance. Among them, the brothers of the 1st Cavalry Division were at the front. As the division commander, Xianxia took the lead and led a group of people to the front. When he saw the mess on the battlefield, the corpses that littered the ground and the blood that dyed the plains red, he could not help but nod his head. He could feel that the new Second Army must have used all their strength in this battle. "General Tian, thank you for your hard work." Shibi led a group of officers of the new Second Army to welcome him. "Commander Shibi, thank you for your hard work. There must have been a lot of casualties in this battle." Tianhu immediately saluted and then asked with a look of concern. Everyone knew that the new Second Army had just gone through an unforeseen event. Originally, the organization wasn't complete. Now that they had to fight such a fierce battle, it was already very difficult for them. Fortunately, our new Second Army isn't made of mud. We can hold on. Division Commander Kong Ji was afraid that the new Second Army would be looked down upon by others, so he took the initiative to stand up and answer. "Sigh." However, Shibi waved his hand at Kong Ji and said to Tianhu, "General Tian, this is the division commander of the new Second Army's 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He is a bit straightforward. If he said anything that offended you, please don't take it to heart." The reason why he called Tianhu general instead of division commander was that he was a major general. This was not something that an ordinary division commander could compare to. In fact, compared to his position in Bugnam of Gojoseon's heart, he was probably even lower than an ordinary division commander. Shibi was able to become the commander of the new Second Army in a way that came later not only because his ability to command the army was good, but also because his EQ was very high. This could be seen from this conversation. "Oh, it's Mr. Kong. Sorry for the disrespect." Tianhu smiled indifferently. Then he looked at Shibi and said, "I, Tianhu, am not that petty. We are all comrades, so I won't take it to heart. And I really admire the new Second Army. At least, if it were our 1st Cavalry Division, we wouldn't be able to do it no matter what." Tianhu's words were not meant to belittle them. They were all from the bottom of his heart. Yang Chendong said that the 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry brigade. They were an existence that would rather break than bend. In their division, there were only soldiers who died in battle. There were no kneeling captives. This was also their characteristic. Haha, General Tian is really praising us. We were also forced to do it. When talking about the past, there was a trace of shame on Shibi's face. No matter what, it's good to be able to persevere and hold on. How about this? We also seized 5,000 warhorses during the Battle of the First City. Now we will give them to the new Second Army. Take it as the 1st Cavalry Division's sponsorship to our brother's army. Please accept it, Commander Shibi." Tianhu also laughed and then gave a generous gift. Chapter 1189. The 1st Cavalry Division always had 2 horses per person when they were on the road. If there were more, it would be difficult to take care of them. But how could they not pick up the horses that were abandoned on the road? And because they were at the front, they picked up some good stuff. Now that they had nowhere to put the horses, they decided to give them to the new Second Army. It could be considered a good karma, and it could also show the 1st Cavalry Division's sincerity. Hearing that there were 5,000 horses, Kong Ji's expression became much better. He finally knew that Tianhu was not laughing at them, but was sincerely admiring them. Thank you very much," Shibi said with a touched expression. He also knew that if the other party brought too many warhorses, it would affect their speed. But no matter what, he had to remember the favor of this gift of horses. Otherwise, they could have sent a troop to send the horses back. It would definitely be a great merit. The 5,000 warhorses were quickly handed over. Considering that the Walla cavalry was already far away and that they had to chase after them, Xianxia proposed to take his leave. She took out the limited food in the city to send the 1st Cavalry Division off. When he sent Xianxia off, he asked tentatively, "General Xian, if I ask the 6th young master to join the battle, do you think he will agree?" Although the new 2nd Army's strength had been greatly reduced after going through a series of events, they had to fight if there was a chance to turn the situation around. Only in this way could the new 2nd Army's momentum be shown, and they could get rid of the humiliation of surrendering to Beiming earlier. Xianxia naturally saw this clearly, so he did not choose to remain silent. Instead, he said after thinking for a while, "Those 5,000 horses can be used as entrance tickets if they are properly trained." "Oh, thank you General Xian for reminding me." She was stunned at first, but then he understood the meaning of these words. Obviously, Xianxia was reminding him that as long as there were enough cavalry and enough elites, they would have a chance to participate in the battle against the Walla. The 1st Cavalry Division finally left. Seeing the departing army, Division Commander Kong Ji sighed and said, "I didn't expect the division commander of the world's #1 cavalry division to be so humble. He doesn't have any arrogance at all. Also, he has sincerely helped our new 2nd Army." "You're right. General Xian is indeed a straightforward person. Perhaps his vision has long surpassed ours. In his eyes, he wants to conquer the world with the 6th young master. Only such a person is worthy of being the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division." Xian, who didn't know what Shi Bi and Kong Ji were saying about him. At this moment, he was hurrying on his way to the battlefield as he called the 5 commanders over to assign them combat missions. "When we march, we must put the scouts further away. Do you remember how we were ambushed by the 6th young master? At that time, it was all thanks to the 6th young master showing mercy. Otherwise, our 1st Cavalry Division's reputation would have been tarnished. Therefore, I want to tell everyone that there's always someone better than you. Any actions or thoughts that look down on your opponents are unacceptable. If anyone dares to have such thoughts, then get out of the 1st Cavalry Division. We don't accept people who are arrogant and have no ability." When he said this, Xianxia's face was solemn, and he was very serious. This was also a problem that he had just discovered. When he was in Shaojing City, facing the new 2nd Army, which had a history of repeated failures, his soldiers showed a sense of superiority. They didn't pay attention to others when they spoke, and some of them didn't even talk to others. This made the officers of the new 2nd Army feel very embarrassed. But from beginning to end, the commander-in-chief had never once complained to him. Just because others didn't complain didn't mean that it didn't happen. At that time, Xianxia considered that this was an internal matter of his division, so he didn't say anything. Now that he finally had the chance, he couldn't hold back and vented his anger to the 5 regimental commanders. "Don't think that you're the best in the world. What did we rely on to have our current achievements? It's our comrade in arms, the 6th young master, who gave us preferential policies. Think about it. When did we not choose first when there were good soldiers? When there were good equipment, we didn't use it first. When there were good horses, we didn't choose first. Even if there were good food and drinks, we were the first to choose first. With this kind of full protection, even if we didn't do it, there would still be others who would do it, and they might even do it well. Therefore, everything that we have now has absolutely nothing to do with our own efforts. Do you understand? Regimental commanders, go back and check yourselves. When you rest during the march, you'll start criticizing and self-criticizing activities. If there's anyone who doesn't have a deep enough understanding, you'll have to help them understand. If they don't change, they'll be kicked out of our 1st Cavalry Division. All right, there's no room for discussion on this matter. You can organize yourselves. However, I'm going to do a spot check to see which regimental commanders didn't do well. I won't find trouble with the battalion commanders, company commanders, platoon commanders, squad leaders, or soldiers. I'll only find you regimental commanders. If you don't meet the standards, I'll consider requesting the 6th young master to transfer you out of the 1st Cavalry Division after the war. His words were ruthless. Directly transferring out of the 1st Cavalry Division was tantamount to cutting off his future path of advancement and hope. The regimental commanders who originally didn't care much about it immediately became more serious. Especially the 1st Regiment Commander Taimu and the 3rd Regiment Commander Hu Bo. They were both uncouth men who didn't care much about this kind of ideological education. Just now, they were thinking of going through the process to get away with it. But now, they didn't dare to have such thoughts anymore. Everyone knew that if they were really kicked out of the 1st Cavalry Division because of this matter, they wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Even with their contributions, if they were to go to other divisions, it would be difficult for them to raise their heads. In this meeting, Tian was just expressing his thoughts. However, he didn't know how important this meeting was to the future development of the 1st Cavalry Division. This was equivalent to making up for their biggest shortcoming. When courage and carefulness were combined, when courage and modesty were combined, when powerful combat strength and a strong heart complemented each other, they would become the most difficult opponent to defeat. During the Ming Dynasty, Ili Belly was a part of the Chagatai Khanate of the Yuan Dynasty. Crooked Thoughts became its first king. He moved his people west to the Ili River Valley, which is the current Yining region of Xinjiang, and changed the name to Ili Belly. Ili was another transliteration of Ili, and Belly referred to Bali. In 1432 AD, Crooked Thoughts died, and his descendants fought for the throne. The country split into Ili Belly, Yarqiang, and Turafan. One of the descendants still used the name of Ili Belly, and became a subordinate country of the Ming Dynasty. Yarqiang was south of Tian Shan, east of Tsong Mountains, and west of Boston Lake. The other was centered around Turafan. Ili Banli King Bao lied. The thing he wanted to do the most in his life was to reunite Ili Banli and bring the legacy of his ancestors to greater heights. For this, he did not hesitate to lower his head to the Ming Dynasty, and even used Alipu to develop and strengthen himself. In history, Alipu did well, helping King Bao Lied make Ili Belly strong, and he became the leader of the three. Even after he grew old, Ili Belly lasted for dozens of years before dying. However, in this life, Xianxia's sudden rise, especially the rapid development of the 5-star army, changed the original history. Especially after the battle with the 5-star army, Ili Belly had lost a lot of soldiers and generals, and their strength had been greatly reduced. 80,000 of the original 230,000 troops had been eaten, and now there were only 150,000 left. Even though during this period of time, under Alipu's hard work, he had recruited 50,000 new troops, and the size of the army had reached 200,000. However, compared to before, it was not as strong as before, and it attracted the attention of Yarqiang and Turafan. This made King Bao Lied sigh, as he was getting further and further away from his life goal. When it rains, it pours. On this night, it was raining heavily outside the palace. Hurried footsteps could be heard coming from the depths of the palace. A bolt of lightning flashed and illuminated the figure of this person. Who else could it be but Prime Minister Alipu? The person who came was Alipu. He had just received the intel from the scouts, and he was urgently looking for the king to discuss matters. King Bao Lied, who had already rested, was woken up by the servants. He changed into his king attire and saw Alipu in the small hall. When he saw the intel that was sent over, his brows furrowed, showing the anxiety and uneasiness in his heart. Regarding the Wara sending troops to Shur City and working with the Baiming army to deal with the 5-star army, King Bao Lied had known about it long ago. He had always been conflicted about this matter. As far as he was concerned, whether it was the 5-star army or the Wara, they were not easy to deal with. As such, no matter who won or lost, it would not be a good thing for him. If either side expanded, they could threaten him at any time. Unless the Baiming army won, this was a powerful but unambitious country. As long as they submitted to them in name, they would be able to live freely and do what they wanted to do. Because of this, he had asked Alipu about the Baiming army's chances of winning. Alipu's answer was less than 20%. He also said that even if the Baiming army won, it would be difficult for them to expand. After all, the Great Ming Dynasty was not just the Baiming army, but there was also the Southern Ming Dynasty. Dealing with internal problems was the most important thing for them to do. This answer was not what Bao Lied wanted to hear. However, since they were small and weak, even if they did not like it, they could only wait for the final victor to appear. They could only hope that no matter who won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. This would give them more time to develop. Now the results were finally out. The 5-star army had won, and the Walla army had fled towards their base in Hanoi. Chapter 1190. King Bao Lai didn't expect this. What he didn't expect was that the five-star army actually chased after them for thousands of miles without any intention of stopping. This naturally caught his attention. The Han people had a saying, "Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold." Hanoi was too close to Ely. If they really fought their way here, they would unknowingly become a threat to their borders. If that really happened, the five-star army would probably attack them. If that was really the case, they had to prepare in advance. Apu appeared here to talk about this matter. He looked at Bao Lai with a worried expression and said, "Your Majesty, the five-star army's way of doing things is quite similar to our ancestors. They really pull out their swords at the slightest disagreement. We have to be careful." Normally, the most important thing between countries was politics. When there was no way to make peace, only when things escalated to the extreme would there be war. This was also the norm when countries interacted with each other. Usually, they would scold each other, but they wouldn't easily send out their troops. That would be a sign of wasting people's money and causing the economy to deteriorate. Everyone understood this principle. However, it was still broken by someone. Just like the Mongolian Empire, they didn't reason with anyone. They just attacked. Often, when countries were still waiting for diplomatic communication, the Mongolian cavalry had already killed their way into the city. This was also one of the reasons why the Mongolian Empire was able to occupy so much territory in such a short period of time. After all, many people couldn't understand the way they attacked without saying anything. In comparison, the five-star army was very similar. They also sent out their troops without saying anything. The only difference was that they had a good reason to send out their troops. Moreover, they treated the people in the occupied land very well. They also put in a lot of effort to develop the local economy. This was also why the backline was generally very stable and didn't have any major problems. However, no matter how good the five-star army treated the people in the occupied land, it didn't mean anything to a king like Bao Lai. People like him cared more about the royal and imperial power. As long as the people were able to live, it didn't matter. With an ugly expression, Bao Lai put down the information, looked up at a lip, and asked, "Xianxia, do you think that if the five-star army defeats Yeshen, they will attack us?" Judging from their past habits, it's very likely. Who told us to be weak? Apu didn't want to say this, but it was the truth. Their territory was small, and their population was small. It was undoubtedly difficult for them to develop greatly in this limited environment. Even though he worked late into the night every day, he was still unable to completely turn the situation around. That's right, we're really too weak. If it was before the split, we would have had a chance to fight against the five-star army. Bao Lai sighed and admitted the truth. When Bao Lai mentioned before the split, Ali's eyes lit up. He looked at Bao Lai expectantly and said, "Your Majesty, you mean?" "That's right. It's time to contact the Yarkiang and Turfan tribes. Although we all want to eat each other, when this kind of survival is threatened, I think they will also put down their prejudices and work together like me." Bao Lai was worthy of being able to appoint a wise minister like Apu. His wisdom and boldness were few and far between. A look of admiration appeared on Arap's face as he nodded heavily. "All right, allow this subject to contact them." "Yes, but it must be done quickly. After all, this is a three-way alliance. It will take a lot of time to adjust and coordinate. What we lack right now is time." Bao Lai looked at Apu solemnly as he spoke in a heavy voice. Apu nodded and asked the king about the alliance. After all, it involved too many things, so every step of the plan had to be done carefully. Otherwise, it would be fine if nothing went wrong, but if something did go wrong, it would be a big problem. The five-star army hadn't even fought with the Wara chief, Yeshen, yet the Ili had already been on high alert. This was somewhat unexpected to Yang Chendong, and it was a major hindrance to his plan to take over this place. And no one knew about this yet. Not even the spies that Xianxia's intelligence agency had planted in the Ili had received any information. Their intelligence agents were currently investigating the situation in Beiming's capital, especially the reaction of the Beiming Imperial court after Shiheng's defeat. Beiming's capital. In the main hall of the Imperial palace, a group of dancers were singing and dancing. There were dozens of tables on their left and right, and each table had an important official of the Imperial court sitting there. They were eating delicious food, drinking wine, and enjoying the dance of the beautiful women. It was a very pleasant scene. Sitting in the main hall of the Imperial Palace, Zhu was very pleased with himself. A few days ago, he had received a report from the 600 from the front line of the first city, saying that the first city was about to be taken and the 5-star army spies in the grasslands would be removed. At that time, the grasslands to the west of Beiming would become safe again. As the Emperor of Beiming, he could sit back and relax. He could then focus all his energy on the southern Ming Empire and unify it. This was undoubtedly good news for Zhu, who had been in constant trouble since he took office. In order to express his happiness, he had held a banquet in the main hall for 3 days to express his gratitude to his officials for their support. People said that horses galloped when they were flushed with success, but they did not know that flushed with success could cause horses to stumble. While Zhu was hosting a banquet for the officials, a young eunuch came to the side of the main hall with a flustered expression. He then winked at Jianghu, the head eunuch who was standing next to the emperor. Jianghu was serving the emperor, pouring wine for him. From time to time, she would tell a few jokes to amuse the emperor. He suddenly noticed the young eunuch's abnormal behavior and was very angry. He had already decided that if it was not something important, he would punish this young eunuch later. This young eunuch was too blind. Taking advantage of the fact that the emperor was watching the dance and was not paying attention to her, Jianghu walked to the side of the hall and said to the young eunuch, "Speak, what is it?" "I'll tell you, if it is not something important, you little monkey can wait to be beaten." The young eunuch did not care about Jianghu's threat at all. With a nervous expression and a trembling voice he said, "Chief eunuch, things are not good. Admiral Shi Heng's army has been defeated. They have now retreated to Tulu City. This is the memorial they submitted. It was sent here at the speed of 800 miles. What? Even though Jianghu had served several emperors and claimed to be experienced and knowledgeable, his expression changed greatly. He had not expected things to turn out like this. Didn't the memorial say that the beginning city could not hold on and was about to be taken? How could there be a turn so quickly, and such a huge change at that? Jianghu didn't quite believe it. She took the urgent document and read it carefully. And when he saw it, he almost fell to the ground. Looking at the contents, it was even worse than the young eunuch's. Jianghu wanted to calm down, but he found that he could not. He could only walk toward the throne room with heavy feet. At that moment, he did not know that his expression was frighteningly ugly. Cold sweat was even running down his neck. Dai Zong was so happy that he didn't notice any of this. His gaze was still on the dancers. When Jianghu came close to him and handed him the memorial, he casually pushed it away. "What time is this? I won't look at the memorial first. Let's talk about it later." Your Majesty, you should look at it now," Jianghu said with difficulty. Jianghu braced herself as she spoke. A eunuch actually dared to disobey the emperor's orders. That was a capital offense. But at that moment, he had no other choice. He knew that if he really suppressed this memorial, it would be time to punish him. Jianghu had actually disobeyed an edict. This finally attracted Dai Zong's attention. He saw that the hands that were handing over the memorial were trembling. Suddenly, he had a bad feeling. With a solemn expression, he reached out and took the memorial. Then he flipped through it. After about 10 breaths, he suddenly roared in anger. "Trash, a bunch of trash." The sudden rage of the emperor caused the originally peaceful main hall to fall into silence. The musicians stopped playing. The dancers were also trembling in fear. They stood in a corner of the hall, not knowing what to do. "Leave, all of you, leave." Jianghu took the opportunity to wave his hand at the musicians and dancers. The main hall returned to silence. Then, all the officials focused their gazes on the acting emperor, Zhu, whose face was red from holding back his anger. No one knew what had happened to make the emperor so angry. "Here, let them take a look." After a pin-drop silence in the main hall, Zhu finally reacted. He took the memorial and threw it to Jianghu, who was standing at the side with his back hunched. "Your subject obeys." Jianghu agreed. Then, he took the memorial and walked down the hall. He handed it to Su Yozhen, who was standing at the first position on the left. Su Yozhen reached out to take it. He opened it and read it. Then, he sucked in a breath of cold air. After 2 breaths of silence, he handed the memorial to the other important officials. Xianxia was defeated. The 5-star army won again. Not only did they solve the siege of Beginning City, but they also launched a fierce counterattack. When it rains, it pours. Even Shajing and Jianghu City, which had previously submitted to Beiming, rebelled. They were returned to the 5-star army. This meant that the long period of planning was all for naught. So much effort and money invested had turned into ashes. It was no wonder that the emperor was so angry. Chapter 1191. A few moments later, many of the officials who had read the memorials had grave expressions. They could clearly see the severity of the situation. Many of them were even thinking, if the 5-star army used the momentum of their victory to suddenly attack Tulu City, what would they do? Would Xianxia, who had already suffered defeat, be able to defend the city? If he couldn't defend it, once the 5-star army broke in, the Beiming army would be forced into an internal battle. This was an extremely dangerous matter. Once Beiming's capital was attacked, it would affect their own interests and safety. The officials had no choice but to take this matter seriously. Of course, there were also people like Su Yozhen, who had long since submitted to Yang Chendong. He pretended to have a grave expression on his face, but he was actually very happy on the inside. For him, once the 5-star army entered the city, he would openly become a high-ranking official of the Xianxia. He might even be treated even better. You've all read it. Tell me, how should we deal with this? During this time, Zhu Qiyu had already steadied her mind. When she looked at the ministers, her eyes were full of hope. Your Majesty, Tulu City is a gateway. We can't lose it. Your Majesty, Xianxia's defeat cannot be avoided. He should be heavily punished and replaced with a new commander. Your Majesty, the 5-star army is coming with menacing momentum and cannot be resisted. There is no harm in sending someone to talk to him and see if he can be persuaded to withdraw. Your Majesty. After Zhu Qiyu asked this question, there were all kinds of comments below. There were all kinds of suggestions, which made people feel a little dizzy after listening to them. Zhu Qiyu had no choice but to roar. Enough! All of you shut up. We are the emperor, and Yang Chendong is just a lowly bugnam of Gojoseon. We even conferred him the title, so how can we lower our heads to him? Let's not talk about peace talks anymore. As for replacing the commander, do you have any suitable candidates in mind? After expressing that he would not lower his head to Yang Chendong, he asked about the candidate for the new commander. At this moment, the entire hall was so silent that a pin drop could be heard. Although Xianxia was a little greedy for money and power, it had to be said that he still had some skills in war. Moreover, over the years, he had already built up enough prestige in the army. How could Beiming have a backup for such a handsome man? Now that it was said that there was a change in leadership, who would be able to take on this important responsibility? After asking, there was no response for a long time. Zhu Qiyu knew that it was impossible to change the commander. In this case, he had to settle for the second best and said, everyone has read the memorial. Although Marquis Wuxia has the leadership responsibility this time, he is not the main reason. He is still in his position. Let's forget about the proposal of changing the commander. Now, let's talk about the problem of how to defend Tulu City first. If anyone has any opinions, feel free to raise them. Zhu Qiyu also knew that there were people in the Imperial court who had a close relationship with Xianxia. If he showed that he wanted to change the commander or did not trust him, these words would inevitably spread out. This would have a negative effect on his control over Xianxia. This was not what he wanted to see now. Naturally, they would be punished after losing the battle. However, how to punish them and when to punish them still needed to be discussed at length. At least in the current situation, they absolutely could not be punished. Not only that, they also needed to be rewarded to stabilize the people's hearts. This was the so-called way of using people. Send troops, a large number of reinforcements. Don't we have millions of soldiers in training? Pick some of the elites and send them to Tulu City. No matter what, we have to defend it. With the high walls and thick city walls, we can fight an offensive and defensive battle like the first city. As long as the battle lasts for a long time with strong strength, the 5-star army will be defeated in the end. The Minister of War, Yi Ming, stood up and put forward his own opinion. As the Minister of War, Yi Ming's authority was even greater than that of the previous Minister of War. This was all because Baiming took on a large number of training troops to prepare for war. Anyway, he was very comfortable and proud as the Minister of War. Yes, Minister Yi is right. I think that not only should we send troops to defend the city, but we can also find an opportunity to fight outside the city. In this way, we may be able to catch the 5-star army by surprise. It is not impossible to regain the initiative on the battlefield. Your Majesty, no matter what, the first city has been besieged for a long time. After such a long defensive battle, its strength should be at its weakest. We can't miss this opportunity. Grand Young Master Fu, Grand Scholar, and Minister of Justice Su Yozhen also stood up and put forward their opinions. Hearing that they would take the initiative to attack and catch the 5-star army off guard, Zhu Qiu's eyes couldn't help but brighten. He looked at Su Yozhen with admiration and said, Minister Su's words are reasonable. Minister Yi, we might as well do it. Inform Shi Hang to find an opportunity to fight outside the city. Yes. Yi Ming immediately agreed. The originally celebratory court banquet thus ended. Everyone had a lot on their minds. They only hoped that Shi Hang could turn the tide and allow them to continue to abuse their power in the capital. However, when one official walked out of the hall, he was extremely worried. He was the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions move first. Once he increased the number of troops sent to Tulu, it would involve tens of millions of money and provisions. This was his responsibility, and also his source of worry. Not long ago, he gave the provisions that he had saved not long ago to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region. Although he had some now, it was beyond his ability to provide for hundreds of thousands of troops. In the face of such a large army that suddenly set out, where would he get the provisions? It was about to enter autumn. This year's provisions had not been completely conquered. If the army's expedition was delayed because of this, wouldn't he be a sinner? After leaving the Imperial Palace, Jin Lian gravely said, Come on, let's not go back to the residence. Let's go straight to the Su residence. In the end, he decided to discuss this matter with Su Yozhen. Back then, it had been Su Yozhen who had suggested that he send provisions to Li Tong. Now that there was a problem, he naturally wanted to hear his opinion. Within the Su residence, Su Yozhen had only just entered when the steward came to report that the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, had arrived and was waiting outside. Oh, so fast. Su Yozhen's expression did not change as he smiled and said, Minister Jin, please come to the main hall for a talk. Su Yozhen and Jin Lian met in the main hall, and the latter sighed. Lord Su, you've really made me suffer this time. Su Yozhen feigned ignorance and asked, Lord Jin, did you say this? Oh, Lord Su. Do you still remember how you suggested that I send provisions to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region? Jin Lian had no idea that Su Yozhen was feigning ignorance, only that he had been so busy that he had forgotten, so he reminded him. Oh, there was such a matter. At that time, General Li Tong sent someone to find my steward and gave him 20,000 taels of silver. Oh right, didn't I give Lord Jin 10,000 taels? What, is there something else? Su Yozhen purposely mentioned the 10,000 taels of silver to tell Jin Lian that he had accepted a bribe. If this matter was blown out of proportion, it would not be good for anyone. Jin Lian was stunned. He had also forgotten about the 10,000 taels of silver. Now that he thought about it, it was not that the time had not come yet. For a moment, his tone weakened. Lord Su, you're right. However, the Emperor wants to send troops to attack the 5-star army. How much provisions would that require? Our Ministry of Revenue does not have that much. You don't have any? Su Yozhen had already sent people to investigate the Ministry of Revenue's warehouse, but he still pretended to be ignorant. Yes, we don't. I'm not afraid of Lord Su's ridicule, but in the past few years, our Baiming has expanded the army quickly, putting great pressure on our Ministry of Revenue. Although we have some now, it is only for daily training. Once it is used in battle, it will not be enough. When Jin Lian said this, he was about to cry. In contrast to the Minister of War, Yi Ming, the other was very satisfied. His Ministry of Revenue had always been tight. If he had not intentionally saved from all sides, there would have been problems long ago. Yi Ming was a qualified official. At least he was very good at saving money. It was a pity that even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. He did not have any good ideas. These words were very pitiful, but in Su Yozhen's ears, he said with an indifferent expression, "Since it's not enough, then just report it directly." "Directly report it," Lord Su is saying. "Report it to the emperor?" As if he had misheard, Yi Ming asked with his mouth wide open. "Of course it is to report it to the emperor. I say, Lord Yi, the food was indeed given to General Li Tong. There is nothing shameful about it. In any case, as the Minister of Revenue, you have already done your best. Our wise emperor can understand." Su Yozhen appeared very relaxed. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Instead, it was his sincere way of dealing with the situation. After all, the amount of food they lacked was too great. Today, Zhu Qiu's intention was not to send 30 to 50,000. It was very likely that he would send 100,000 or 200,000 would be normal. With so many people, how much food would they need? Even if they could find a way to get some, it would not be a solution after a long time. Thus, reporting it was a matter of time. Since it was so, it was better to report it in the morning. This could be considered as pouring cold water on Daizong. It also let him know that fighting a war was not as simple as just talking. It needed money and food. If they were not willing to spend money, they would not be able to fight a war, much less win a war. Su Yozhen said twice to report the matter to the emperor, and Yi Ming finally faced it seriously. After careful consideration, it seemed that this was the only path he could take. Although it was inevitable that he would be reprimanded if he reported it like this, and he might even be punished, he was not an immortal. He could not conjure food, so he could only do this. "Well, Lord Su, I will report to the emperor tomorrow, but I will have to trouble Lord Su to help me beat the drum. Now, who doesn't know that the emperor relies on Lord Su very much? This time you have to save me." Well said, well said. Tomorrow, I will meet the emperor with Lord Yi. It just so happens that I have something to report to the emperor. Su Yozhen nodded. He urgently needed to complete the task handed over by Yang Chendong, so he had to get the first-hand information. If he could go with Yi Ming, he would owe him a favor and get the information. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Chapter 1192. Most importantly, he could also take the opportunity to persuade Daizong to be cautious. Yang Chendong said that they only needed to wait for 2 more months and the safety of the beginning city would be impregnable. At that time, even if Baiming sent out an army, they would not be afraid. Although he did not know why all of this was done, since Yang Chendong said it, Su Yozhen could only choose to believe it. Furthermore, he only needed to delay the Northern Ming dynasty for 2 months. This was not a difficult task. With Su Yozhen's guarantee, Yi Ming left with satisfaction. However, what was unexpected was that the next morning, Yi Ming went directly to the entrance of Su Mansion and acted as if he wanted to accompany Su Yozhen to the court. It was obvious that he was afraid that Su Yozhen would find an excuse to run away. "Lord Yi, you don't believe me." After leaving the mansion and seeing Yi Ming's sedan, Su Yozhen knocked on the other party with an unhappy expression. I'm sorry. I need Lord Su's help. Please forgive me. However, Lord Su, don't worry. After today, I will definitely apologize to Lord Su. You see." Yi Ming showed a pitiful look and looked at Su Yozhen with a sad gaze. "Then let's go." Su Yozhen pretended to be in a difficult position and said. However, when he returned to the sedan, his face was not ugly at all. Not only that, but he was also a little excited. Being able to build a good relationship with Yi Ming would only be of great help to him in understanding Baiming's economic strength. This time, the other party owed him a favor. In the future, when he inquired about some things, it would be easier for him to get information. The 2 ministers of the Imperial court entered the palace together and participated in the court meeting. After the meeting, the 2 of them went to the back hall to meet Zhu Qiu. In the back hall, when Yi Ming and Su Yozhen had just knelt down, Zhu Qiu took the lead to speak. "Minister Yi, you have to hurry up and prepare the amount of money for the army mobilization. Before the army is mobilized, the provisions have to be prepared first. Your responsibility is great." "Your Majesty. I'm guilty." Yi Ming's face was full of sadness. If one looked carefully, one would see that his eyes were a little red. At this moment, Yi Ming's appearance definitely had the potential to become a movie star. "You're guilty? What crime is there?" Zhu Qiyu looked at Yi Ming, who was still kneeling on the ground, and had a bad feeling. Your Majesty, it's like this. The grain reserves of our Ministry of Revenue are not enough to support a large-scale war. Now we... Without waiting for Yi Ming to finish speaking, Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, almost jumped up. What did you say? There was no more food? Where did they go? Wasn't last year's harvest pretty good? I remember that the price of food is not high. Don't you know how to collect more? They were about to send out their troops, and now Yi Ming was telling them that they didn't have any provisions. Wasn't this just tearing down their stage? How could he not be angry? How could he not be angry? Seeing that the emperor was indeed infuriated by the dragon debate, the kneeling Yi Ming hurriedly explained, Yes, your Majesty is right. Last year's harvest was good, and the price of grain wasn't high, but we weren't the only one collecting grain. Many big clans and merchants were also collecting grain. Their prices were even a little higher than the government, so most of the grain was taken away by them. The common people often said that it was hard for the people in bad years, but it was even harder for the people in good years. This was referring to the problem of grain prices. When the harvest was bad, grain production was low, and grain prices were high. Other than handing over their grain, the common people had nothing left. Because there was no grain to sell, they couldn't make any profit. On the other hand, when the harvest was good, grain prices were especially low, and they couldn't make much money. They could only scrape together enough to eat. This was the common people's sorrow. Compared to those big families, they were different. When the price of food was low, they would buy in large quantities and hoard them. Then when the price of food was high, they would sell it in exchange for a large amount of money. It was difficult to say that they would suffer a loss. Over time, they relied on this kind of business to make money, and their hearts became wild. It developed to the point where they fought with the government to buy grain. The same grain, different prices. Farmers would definitely be willing to sell to the side with a higher price. This also caused Yi Ming to not be able to buy much grain. Taken away? Taken away! Zhu Qiyu had already stood up angrily from the dragon throne. Then, he kept pacing back and forth to show the anger in his heart. As the emperor, he was actually aware of the grain problem. He was even aware of who was stirring up trouble and reselling the grain. However, the influence of these people wasn't small. Once they joined forces, it would involve many aspects, to the point that he couldn't help but be afraid. This was also the reason why he couldn't do anything even though he knew that someone was collecting grain. Is it possible to buy some grain from those people at a fair price? After pacing back and forth a few times, Zhu Qiyu suddenly turned around and asked the kneeling Yi Ming. Your Majesty. With a bitter expression, Yi Ming said, It's impossible to buy grain at a fair price. Adding some money shouldn't be a problem. After all, they are Baiming's subjects. They should also contribute to Baiming. And then how much money do you need to add? Hearing that there was a way, Zhu Qiyu's face revealed a trace of expectation. This. Yi Ming didn't immediately answer. Instead, he calculated in his heart. Then, he raised his head and stretched out a hand. 10%. When Zhu Qiyu saw that it was only one hand, his expression became much more relaxed. No, it's 50%. Yi Ming opened up his hand as he spoke. At this moment, there were 5 hands. What? They are profiting from the country's crisis. They are forcing me. When he heard that it was 50%, Zhu Qiyu immediately became unhappy. As a result, the original 30,000 jin of grain could only buy 20,000 jin. This price difference was too high. Zhu Qiyu cursed these profiteers and rich families in his heart. However, he didn't have any better methods to deal with them. Who asked these people to exist to represent the interests of too many people? Once he lost the support of these people, it would be hard to say if his throne would be stable. Unable to make an example out of these people, Zhu Qiyu could only lower his tone and ask, Is there any other method? No. His head shook like a rattle drum. Yi Ming continuously shook his head. If he really had a better method, he wouldn't have come here to be scolded. If there isn't, then what are you doing as the Minister of Revenue? Finally, the thunderous anger that Yi Ming imagined appeared. At this moment, he lowered his head and gave a look to Su Yozhen who came with him. This was the time to see the use of an alliance. Su Yozhen had been waiting for an opportunity. If he didn't let Zhu Qiyu understand some things, it would be hard to say what he wanted to say. Seeing that the time had come, if it was any later, Yi Ming might be punished. If another minister of revenue came up, it might not be beneficial to his work. He finally slowly raised his head, holding the ceremonial tablet in his hand, and said, "Emperor, please calm down. This subject has a way to solve the food problem." Zhu Qiyu, who was really angry, even wanted to punish Yi Ming. Su Yozhen's words instantly extinguished a lot of his anger. "Beloved Minister Su, you said you have a method?" "That's right. Although this subject's method can't solve the problem immediately, we only need to wait for a month or so. When this year's rations arrive, the problem will be solved." Su Yozhen raised her head and spoke with a righteous expression. "Wait for more than a month?" Zhu Qiyu repeated after hearing that. "Yes, it's only a month. It won't delay the army's departure. Saving this time can save us a lot of money. No matter how you look at it, it's a profit. When the time comes, we can use the same price to compete with them. I believe the people will support the government more. Speaking of money, this subject has an idea that I want to report to the emperor." Using money to talk about the matter, Su Yozhen talked about the other topic that he had come for today. When the matter of money was brought up, Zhu Qiyu clearly became nervous. The longer he had been the emperor, the more he knew the benefits of money. Without money, it really was hard to move forward. He even thought that if he didn't have money, would people still listen to him? "Beloved Minister Su, we are listening." "Yes, Your Majesty. Since this subject has taken charge of the Ministry of Justice, I found that there are often insufficient prison cells. This is because there are too many people who don't follow self-discipline. Of course, there are also some people who make mistakes in the heat of the moment. They have said more than once that they want to repent, but they don't have the chance. Because of this, many people have come to this subject. There are even some people who want to use money to redeem themselves. This way, we can give those who have always been good a chance to repent. At the same time, we can alleviate the problem of insufficient prison cells. This subject has thought about it again and again. This subject doesn't have the authority to make such a big decision, so this subject asks for Your Majesty's instructions. Use money to redeem people? Won't that cause problems?" Zhu Qiyu quickly grasped the crux of the matter. "It won't. Not all crimes can be redeemed with money. Only when the crime isn't serious and the person has the intention to turn over a new leaf will it be allowed. As for the specific details, our Ministry of Justice will send people to carefully verify them." That's right. There was a child surnamed Chen who had always been good. When he was preparing to take the exam to become a county official, he drank too much and unintentionally injured someone. It was only a minor injury. Our local constable arrived soon after. In the end, he was sentenced to 3 months in prison. Speaking of which, the crime wasn't serious and the time he spent in prison wasn't very long. However, the problem was that it would delay his chances of passing the exam and even affect his future. The Chen family came to me because of this matter. They were willing to compensate the person who was beaten and also wanted to redeem him. Oh, they were prepared to pay 5,000 taels of silver to redeem him. Chapter 1193. So much silver, but it's just a light injury? Zhu Qiyu listened carefully. When he heard that such a small matter could bring 5,000 taels of silver into the national treasury, his eyes widened with a look of disbelief. Yes, this is the price that they offered. This subject has thought about it. Since this matter concerns a person's future, and the Chen family is a respectable family, a mere 5,000 taels is not enough. No matter what, it has to be doubled. We have to ask for 10,000 taels. Su Yozhen's tone was normal, but the result of her words shocked Zhu Qiyu. It was just injuring someone and being punished with 3 months of imprisonment. If they let the person go, they could get 10,000 taels. This deal was too easy to make. If everything was like this, then he would buy Ming how many children with the surname Chen? How much money could their national treasury earn in a year? This was a great plan to make a fortune. With money they could do many things. When the time came, would they have to worry about not being able to destroy their opponents? The excited Zhu Qiyu once again paced back and forth in the Dragon Palace. After pacing back and forth several times, he finally made up his mind and said, "All right, Zhen understands the matter. The specifics will be handled by beloved official Su, but those who have committed heinous crimes cannot be released. Also, Zhen will not mention this matter to anyone else, nor will Zhen agree. Do you understand? Zhu Qiyu wanted to be a whore, but he also wanted to establish a chastity. If nothing happened, he could earn enough money. If something big happened, he could push off the blame. Su Yozhen originally did not expect the emperor to issue a decree. If it really was done, wouldn't the rich be able to do whatever they wanted? He only needed the emperor to know about this matter. The specifics would naturally be handled by him. As for whether or not this matter would attract the opposition of the other officials, he was not afraid. Not to mention that he had countless methods to force the opposing officials to shut their mouths. He also had Yang Chendong as an escape route. He did this in order to disrupt the social order of Baiming. If he could not stay here, Bugnam of Gojoseon would definitely ensure his safety. Yi Ming, who should have been beaten with a board, was not punished because of Su Yozhen. In the end, they agreed to postpone the departure of the army for more than a month. They would set out to the grasslands after the autumn harvest. The two ministers walked out of the palace together. Along the way, Yi Ming expressed his gratitude many times. Su Darren, His Majesty's fondness for you is truly envious of others. After a round of thanks, Yi Ming spoke of his thoughts on today's matter. Yi Darren is overpraising me. All this is just what a subject should do. Su Yozhen chuckled. Today's meeting with the saint was like killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only did he delay Baiming's deployment of troops, but he also owed Yi Ming a favor. At the same time, he also planted the seeds of chaos in Baiming's social order. This time, he had made a great contribution in front of Yang Chendong. Ai, if all the officials were like Lord Su, then who would be a match for our Baiming? Hee, it's just that there's one thing this lowly official doesn't understand. Yi Ming was a primary second-rank official. Su Yozhen was a secondary first-rank official. It wasn't wrong to use the word lowly official. This was enough to prove Yi Ming's admiration for Su Yozhen at this moment. Yi Darren, please don't say that. If there's anything, we can discuss it with each other. Su Yozhen naturally wouldn't be arrogant and returned with a smile. All right, then this lowly official will speak presumptuously. Just now, Su Darren said that depending on the situation, those people can be ransomed. I wonder what the standard is. Yi Ming finally asked what he wanted to ask. In his opinion, there was no standard at all. If there had to be one, it would all depend on Su Yozhen's words. If Su Yozhen thought that it could be redeemed, then it was the same as committing the crime of murder. On the other hand, if he thought that it couldn't be done, then you had to hold on even if you were wrongly accused. In this way, how much power would this be? How many high-ranking officials and nobles would be able to make friends with this matter? Over time, once enough of a net was formed, it would be difficult for the emperor to move against Su Yozhen in the future. There would be many constraints and difficulties. Oh, this matter. There are no regulations now, but there will definitely be in the future. Well, if Yi Darren has any friends who need help, just ask. Su Yozhen knew that Yi Ming saw through the trick in this matter, but he was not afraid. Everyone was good. He wouldn't deliberately target anyone. On the contrary, he was very willing to do some favors. Yi Ming wanted this sentence. After all, Su Yozhen was the Minister of Justice. He was the boss of this matter. He couldn't intervene even if he wanted to. Being able to get this promise, once there was a friend who needed help in the future, he would also have some confidence. Thank you, Su Darren. Yi Ming clasped his fist and laughed. Well said, ha. Su Yozhen also clasped his fist and laughed. The Baiming army delayed the time to re-enter the grassland because of the grain and fodder. When the news appeared in front of Yang Chendong in the form of a telegram, he also breathed a sigh of relief and said, Very good. The new grain will only be harvested after more than a month. At that time, it will take more than 3 months to collect grain, buy grain, and mobilize the army. There is no need to worry about the beginning city. The alliance between the Baiming army and the Walla army had indeed brought a lot of trouble to Yang Chendong. At one point, it even almost caused the new First Army and the new Second Army to be completely wiped out. Even now, thinking back on the dangers involved, it was still so frightening. If the matter of the Shaowei province had not been resolved quickly enough, he was afraid that he would not have been able to save the beginning city in time. Now, Yang Chindong's strength was expanding rapidly, especially after he took over the Small province, which gave him more foundation. More than 500,000 of the original Wa soldiers were captured and surrendered, which gave him more confidence in doing things. Yang Chindong's strength was expanding rapidly, especially after he took over the Small Wa province, which gave him more confidence in doing things. Send a telegram to the small Japanese Empire and ask them to speed up the reorganization of the army. The first echelon, 50,000 people, will set off in half a month at the latest and enter the Liaodong region. They will appear in front of the beginning city in 2.5 months at the latest. Send a telegram to Qiqian City and ask Castellan Yu Qian to prepare more food and supplies to the Shaowei province by sea. Half a month later, they will follow the army to the Liaodong region. Send a telegram to the person in charge of the security bureau in the capital of Baiming. Commend Su Yozhen for his recent work. At the same time, take out 1 million taels of silver as a fund for activities. At the same time, pay attention to the safety of my family, the Hu family, and other close people of this king. A series of orders came from Yang Chindong's mouth. Only then did Yang Chendong walk out of the military tent energetically. Outside the military tent, there was smoke rising from the kitchen. It was obviously time for lunch. Pass down the order. After lunch, the troops will speed up and arrive at Shaojing City as soon as possible. At the same time, inform the 4th Army Division at the back to speed up their march. Yang Chendong could not wait any longer. He had to launch a sudden attack while the Walla cavalry's morale was low. Otherwise, if he did not remove the roots of the weeds, they would grow again when the spring breeze came. Once Yes Hen escaped, it would be difficult to find him in the vast grassland. This was the reason why he only brought these troops to Hanoi. He was afraid that if he brought too many troops, Yes Hen would escape without a fight. He was especially afraid that he would escape to the north. In that case, he would really be letting the tiger return to the mountain. Hanoi region, disorderly well city. Those who had fled back were the first to enter the city with their cavalry in a somewhat sorry state. When they left the city, they were so arrogant, leading 150,000 elite cavalrymen. But when they returned, there were less than 30,000 cavalrymen. Moreover, they had lost their food. Anyone with eyes could see the result of this battle. As one of the 4 most important generals under Xianxia, and the only remaining one, Bo Mu led his cavalry out of the city gates to welcome Xianxia. When he saw Xianxian's dusty appearance, he immediately rode up and asked with concern, "Leader Yu, if there's anything, we'll talk about it when we get back." Noticing that there were many people looking at him at the city gate, Yes Hen shook his head gently and gave Bo Mu a look. The army smoothly entered the city and soon came to the general's mansion. When there was no one else, Yes Hen took off his armor and said something that surprised Bo Mu. "This time we lost. The 5-star army has been chasing us. For safety's sake we must leave here." "Leave here? But," Bo Mu said with a puzzled expression. The reason why the Vala tribe was able to maintain their current strength, especially after the appearance of the 5-star army and the destruction of the Tatar's main forces, was because they were able to maintain their strength. Even after the surrender of countless Mongol tribes, they were still able to grow and expand. The most fundamental reason was that they were able to occupy a city. In the past, the Mongolian cavalry was used to moving around and attacking in a wandering manner. Usually they were herders, but once they found a target, they would transform into fierce grassland wolves, burning, killing, robbing, and plundering. There was no evil that they would not do. This was their nature and also the environment. The advantage was that they did not have a fixed residence. Even if they had enemies who wanted to take revenge, it would be difficult to find them. The disadvantage was that it was difficult for them to develop and grow. Because they did not have a fixed location, they relied on plundering to make a living, and there was no opportunity to develop. In view of these problems, Yes Hen made a bold decision, and that was to change from wandering to fixed. He sent troops to occupy the cities of the Great Ming Dynasty, and learned from the Great Ming Dynasty's yamen to manage the cities. He allowed outsiders to do business and farm here, and they only charged a certain amount of money. Needless to say, this way they really did develop. Slowly, with money, they could recruit soldiers and buy everything they needed. Gradually, Wara people were no longer a nomadic people, and they were evolving into the Han people. If they continued to develop like this, It was inevitable that they would become stronger and stronger. Once the time was right, it was not impossible to overthrow the old regime and establish a new empire. But now, Yes Hen wanted to change his previous decision and return to a nomadic life. It was no wonder that Bo Muir was so surprised and confused. Chapter 1194. He knew very well what Yes Hen was worried about, so he didn't object immediately. Instead, he asked tentatively, "Leader, is the 5-star army really that powerful? Can they attack Chaos Jing City? We have recently strengthened the city's defenses." Hehe. Yeshen's eyes flashed with fear. He shook his head and said, "You haven't fought with the 5-star army before, so you don't know how powerful they are. Whether it is weapons, equipment, personnel quality, or even riding ability, they are not inferior to us. They can even be said to be stronger than us. Under their powerful guns and cannons, no city can say that it is strong. We will definitely lose if we fight against them." Guns and cannons? Bo Muir shook his head in disbelief. "Those things are not omnipotent. As far as I know, the Beiming army also used a lot of cannons when they attacked the beginning city, but the effect seems to be different." When he said these words, Bo Muir's heart was filled with contempt. In his opinion, the leader must be afraid of the 5-star army. That's why he was so nervous and careful. That's different. Thinking of the red coat cannons used by the Beiming army, Yes Hen shook his head and said, "Cannons are also divided into different levels. Beiming's cannons are no different from a fire stick in front of them. Okay, this matter is settled. We have to leave here as soon as possible. Take as much as you can, and burn the things you can't." Thinking of the power of the 5-star army, especially the power of those cannons, Yes Hen felt very nervous. He just wanted to leave here as soon as possible. As long as he entered the North Desert, he would be able to fly freely. With the strength of the 5-star army, it would be difficult to find him in that kind of environment. Yes Hen was the leader, which was equivalent to the identity of an emperor. He said so with certainty. Even if Bo Muir had different opinions, he had to obey. Knowing that there was no room for change, he reluctantly said, "Okay, leader, I will go and prepare. However, there are a lot of things that need to be taken away. I'm afraid it will take a few days." "Hold on tight, Bo Muir. You have to remember that as long as we are still alive, everything that we have lost can be taken back. But if we are all gone, then we really have nothing left." Yes Hen said some philosophical words with emotion. From this sentence alone, it could be seen that Yes Hen was someone with a tactical mind and could even see the big picture. What he said was somewhat similar to what the later generation said about the existence of people and the loss of people, and the existence of both people and land. Yes Hen had such a view of the overall situation, but the people below might not see it the same way. When they were used to having a fixed home, it was easy to imagine how much resistance there would be when they were asked to wander. As a result, even though the order was given, everyone's efficiency was extremely slow. Previously, Bo Muir had said that it would take a few days, but 10 days had passed and they were still not ready. This made Yes Hen feel more and more danger. He had no choice but to give the order that they had to set off in 5 days. If there were still things that were not properly prepared or loaded into the car, then he would directly destroy them. Easy. It was a town that did not occupy a large area. But because of its geographical location, it had become a place that military strategists would fight for. West past South Ming Hami Guard, south of it was the Ili border state. South of it was the Dahatao region, such as Hanoi and Disordered Well City. East of it was a prairie, over the Lang Mountain and other places were Shaojing City and Jingzhou City. North of it was still a boundless prairie, and about a few hundred miles later, it was a desert, an uninhabited area that could also be called a safe zone and a war-free zone. Such an important place was once the focus of the Great Ming Dynasty's defense, and it also became a bridgehead to prevent the tribes of the prairie from entering the Great Ming Dynasty. The emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty had also arranged a large number of troops here. And all these changes began when the Great Ming Dynasty divided the north and south. According to the geographical division, this place should belong to Beiming, but because it was too far away from the Great Ming Dynasty, it was eventually abandoned and now became one of the territories of the Wara cavalry. When the Wala cavalry faced the 5-star army, it was always difficult for them to gain any advantage, but in the eyes of other forces, it was already a very powerful existence. Since Yes Hen sent people to occupy this place, no one dared to have any ideas about it, and no one wanted to bear the revenge of the Wala cavalry. But this did not include the 5-star army. Just like now, the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment was quietly approaching here. In a low sand dune 10 miles east of Yiji, the regiment commander Tong Long and the deputy regiment commander Zhao Xing were looking down at a simple sand table in front of them, making arrangements and preparations before the battle. Regiment commander, our scouts have reported that there are now 3,000 Walla cavalry in Yiji, and 500 desperados recruited from all over the country, respectively guarding the 4 entrances to the town. There are barricades on the outside and ropes on the inside. It will not be easy for any force to force their way in. The deputy regiment commander Zhao Xing said as he pointed at the sand table in front of him, pointing out the distribution of the Walla cavalry. Hiss! Hearing the analysis, Tong Long could not help but take a deep breath. He thought that Bugnam of Gojoseon ordered him to take down Yiji, and this was a simple matter, but he did not expect that there would be so many difficulties. His Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment only had 5,000 cavalry, and they were the attacking side. If they were not careful, not only would they be heavily injured, but if they could not take down this important town, it would delay Bugnam of Gojoseon's plan. After Zhao Xing finished the report, he also frowned. Obviously he did not know what to do. After all, the enemy's forces were on par with theirs, and they came from afar, so they were not very familiar with the environment. There would be no good result if they forced their way in. But what if they used their wits? It seemed that they could not think of a better way in a short time, and it was likely that it would be extremely difficult to get close to the enemy. Whether it was Tong Long or Zhao Xing, they were both surrendered generals. This caused them to be at a disadvantage compared to others when they first started. Only Yang Chendong was generous, and did not doubt the people he used. After discovering the bravery and intelligence of the two, he was assured to hand over the entire reinforced regiment to them. It was because of this that they felt even more pressure. Under pressure there was unlimited motivation. Tong Long and Zhao Xing had thought that they would perform well on the battlefield to prove their abilities, and also to prove that Bugnam of Gojoseon was not wrong. But now, there was finally a mission that they could complete alone, and now they were helpless. How could they not be anxious? Why don't we just force our way in? I will lead the troops to rush in first, and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao will be at the back. This time, even if we lose all of our reinforced regiment, we must take down Yiji. Bugnam of Gojoseon's orders must be completed. Tong Long, who had run out of ideas, became a little anxious. He simply smashed his fist heavily on the sand table, putting on a desperate stance. You can't, Regiment Commander. Zhao Xing quickly shook his head and said, We are not afraid of death, but if we die without completing the mission, then we will become the sinners of the 5-star army, and our families and friends will be implicated, and we will be looked down upon forever. Then what should we do? What do you think? Tong Long's eyes were spitting fire when he heard that they could not force their way in. Think about it. Think about it. Of course, Zhao Xing did not have a good idea, but he knew that it was impossible to force their way in, and this could very well ruin Bugnam of Gojoseon's grand plan. In that case, even if the entire Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment was sacrificed, they would still not get any credit, and would instead become sinners. Report. Just as the two regimental commanders were arguing and feeling helpless, a bodyguard jogged over. He first saluted Tong Long and Zhao Xing, then said, There are 2 Han men outside the camp. They say they want to see Regimental Commander Tong and Deputy Regimental Commander Zhao. What is there to report about Han people? I don't want to see them. Tong Long waved his hand in anger. On the other hand, Zhao Xing's eyes narrowed. Wait, what did you say? They said they want to see Regiment Commander Tong and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao? Yes, that's what they said. The soldier nodded, indicating that there was no mistake. That's strange. How do they know our names? Zhao Xing said with a face full of confusion. At this moment, Tong Long finally understood what was going on. Could this be the enemy's spy? They've already discovered us, right? It's hard to say. We'll know once we see them, Regiment Commander. You see? Zhao Xing had a feeling that the other party was a friend and not an enemy, otherwise, they would not have reported, and would have brought soldiers to attack them. Then let's see them. How about this, you go invite them in. Also, inform the other soldiers to prepare for battle. Tong Long nodded. No matter who the other party was, he had to make the necessary preparations. After receiving the regiment commander's order, The soldier turned and left, following which, more than 10 executioners lay in ambush on the left and right sides of the temporary tent, ready to rush out and kill at the slightest sign of trouble. After a while, the soldier brought 2 men dressed in Han Chinese clothing, dressed like Jianghu people, into the temporary tent. From afar, the 2 of them were muscular, giving off the feeling that their bodies were filled with explosive power. Following behind the soldier, the 2 of them looked left and right, as if they were very curious about everything. When they entered the tent, the leader paused for a moment, his face revealing an unfathomable smile. Including the soldier, the 5 of them stood in the temporary tent. Both parties did not speak immediately, instead sizing each other up. In the end, it was Deputy Regiment Commander Xianxia who spoke first. 2 strong men, who are you? Hee, you're quite alert. There are even executioners outside, King Kong. We have to be careful not to get killed. The leader did not answer immediately, instead, he spoke to his brother behind him as if there was no one around. Chapter 1195. Tiger King, they're just trying to scare us, right? I'm a coward, what should we do? The man called King Kong spoke, but he didn't look like he was really afraid. The duo's exchange of questions and answers showed that they did not place Tong Long and Zhao Xing in their eyes at all. This caused the former to become displeased as he suddenly raised his voice and said, "The 2 of you, this is not your home. If you have something to say, just say it. If you continue to cause trouble, I will have no choice but to treat you as enemies and take you down first." "Oh, look, you're still anxious. Ha ha ha, King Kong, show us your identity." Tiger King laughed, obviously amused by Tong Long's behavior. Although he said that, his right hand shook and a green military certificate was taken out just like that. Military certificate? Seeing this green certificate, Tong Long and Zhao Xing were shocked. They also had the same certificate, which was proof of their identity. After confirming that the people who came were indeed on their side, the 2 of them relaxed a lot. Then, they reached out and took Tiger King's and King Kong's certificates. But when they opened it, the 2 of them were stunned and looked at the 2 people in front of them in disbelief. Tong Long and Zhao Xing's shocked expressions were not out of Tiger King and King Kong's expectations. Then Tiger King said, "What? Don't you know how to salute when you see your superior?" This question woke the 2 of them up from a dream. The 2 of them quickly put their feet together, stood at attention, and said in unison, "Hello, sir." The 2 of them were the captain of the Wolfang Special Forces, Tiger King, and the captain of the division, King Kong. The Tiger King, also known as the Iron Tiger, didn't need to be mentioned. Although he didn't have many soldiers with him, only a few hundred, he was experienced and powerful. The missions he completed were also irreplaceable. His military rank had long since been promoted to the rank of senior colonel. Even King Kong, who was the captain of the division, was also a colonel. In comparison, the commander of the newly established Liaodong Cavalry Regiment, Tong Long, was only a lieutenant colonel, and Zhao Xing, the deputy commander, was only a major. When the lieutenant colonel and major saw the colonel and the colonel, of course, they had to salute to show their respect. The 2 men saluted, and Iron Tiger and King Kong returned the salute. Then, the 4 men clasped their hands together. Tong Long said excitedly, "I've long heard from Commander Bai Shuang that there's an extremely mysterious Wolfang Special Forces in the 5-star army. You've completed a mission that even thousands of soldiers and horses would find difficult to complete. It's really admirable. I didn't expect to finally meet you now." "That's right. We've admired you for a long time. I didn't expect to meet you here. It's just that you're here for..." Although Deputy Commander Zhao Xing had some guesses in his heart, he still couldn't be sure before he received a concrete answer. Tai Hu laughed heartily and said, "We are here on the orders of the 6th young master to help you capture Yiji. How is it? Do you have any leads?" "Ah, that's great." Hearing that they were here to help him, Tong Long was naturally overjoyed. If he still needed the help of others for a mission, he wouldn't be in a good mood. However, Yiji was a place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It couldn't be better if someone came to help him. "Yes, thank you Wolfang Special Forces for coming to help. To be honest, the commander and I were still worried about the mission. We really couldn't think of any better ideas," Zhao Xing said excitedly. He seemed to have seen the hope of capturing Yiji. The 2 men were so honest that Tai Hu had a good impression of them. He laughed and said, "To be honest, when we received the orders from the sixth young master to help you capture Iji, we didn't really understand it. It's just one soldier and a few more important towns. You have 5,000 cavalrymen. It shouldn't be a problem to complete the mission." However, when we really understood it, we realized that this mission is indeed not easy to complete. Even Tai, who said that the mission was not easy to complete. Tong Long and Zhao Xing were both shocked and said, "What? Even with the strength of the Wolf Fang Special Forces, they can't complete it?" "Haha, our Wolf Fang Special Forces is also made up of people. There are also many missions that we can't complete," Tai Hu said honestly. For example, they couldn't enter the palace of the Great Ming Dynasty to kill the emperor. There were many palace guards there and they were quite strong. If they couldn't complete the mission in a short time, they would be in danger of being surrounded and swallowed. Tai Hu actually admitted it. This made Tong Long and Zhao Xing's faces turn ugly. If even the Wolf Fang Special Forces couldn't do it, then how could they deal with this mission? Without waiting for the two to say anything, Tai Hu laughed and said, "There are some missions that our Wolf Fang Special Forces can't complete, but it doesn't include the mission in front of us. It's just a small town. There are more people than us." Oh! Hearing this sudden turn of events, Tong Long and Zhao Xing's expressions changed. "So you're saying that you can take this place? There's no problem at all. We have already investigated. The one guarding Yiji is a general of the Great Ming Dynasty. His name is He Wei. His specialty is that he is good at fighting defensive battles. After he was captured by Yes Hen, he surrendered because he was afraid of death. As long as we capture this person, all the problems will be solved." When Tai Hu said this, there was a bit of anger in his eyes. As a general of the Great Ming Dynasty, he actually surrendered to another race because he was afraid of death. Such a person, in Yang Qindong's words, was a traitor. And to deal with a traitor, no matter how excessive the method, it was nothing. Therefore it was fine if this He Wei cooperated. If he didn't cooperate, then he didn't mind letting him suffer a fate worse than death. Both Tong Long and Zhao Xing understood the method that Tai Hu proposed. The two immediately asked, "Are we going to capture the leader first? It's just that it's a bit difficult to achieve." "This is nothing. This is one of the subjects that we often train in. Plus, the other party doesn't know that we are here, so the chance of success is 90%. At this time, King Kong, who hadn't spoken much, spoke. 90%? Then 10% is? When he heard that it wasn't 100% certain, Tong Long asked with concern. According to the sixth young master, there is no mission that can be 100% successful before the mission is carried out. Therefore, we only said 90%, but it's no different from 100%. Tai Hu explained with a smile, which was equivalent to giving the other two people confidence. So that's the reason. Tong Long and Zhao Xing chuckled, then asked, "Then when will the mission be carried out? What do we need to do?" "The sixth young master is urging us to take action tonight. We need the cooperation of the two commanders. When the time comes, it'll be like this." In the following time, as the person with the highest military rank, Tai Hu became the overall commander and came up with a military plan to capture Yes Hen. He Wei. He wasn't very tall, and he was even a little chubby. He had a round face, a big mouth, and his eyes were sometimes cloudy and sometimes clear. He gave people a feeling that they couldn't see through him. Speaking of which, he was very capable, especially when he came up with a series of defensive tactics. He once made the grassland cavalry, who wanted to come to the Great Ming Dynasty to harvest grain, suffer a lot. Later on, the Great Ming Dynasty was divided into two. For example, the army guarding the border didn't have any logistical support for a long time. Under Yeshen's heavy siege, they finally surrendered because they had no food. As the general guarding the city, He Wei was naturally taken care of. At first, Yes Hen tried to reason with him and wanted to be used by him. Unfortunately, he didn't move him even when he offered him a high position, a generous salary, and even money and beautiful women. Later on, he wanted to kill him out of anger. However, he didn't expect that he would find his weakness. He was extremely afraid of death. Since He Wei didn't die, he naturally became the general that Yes Hen chose. He was given the mission of guarding the important town, Yes Hen. After accepting the mission, He Wei made full use of his strength. Although he didn't have many troops, he was able to defend EG like it was an impregnable fortress. In his words, it would be impossible for anyone to take down this place without an army of 30 to 50,000. If such an army really appeared in the vicinity, he would have received the news long ago. At that time, whether it was asking for help from Yexian or Turpan in the west, they wouldn't ignore it. After all, taking down this place was equivalent to opening up a path to the other two places. Even if it was for their own sake, they had to take action. With these things to rely on, He Wei's heart could finally be at ease. However, after the previous experience of being captured, he stayed in his home in the town almost every day. When he needed to go out, he would be accompanied by at least 20 bodyguards to protect his safety. Yeshen knew about this. He also knew that He Wei was a capable person, so he specially strengthened the level of protection. Because of his confidence in He Wei, this was also the reason why Yeshen didn't immediately escape to the desert in the north after he was defeated in the origin city. Instead, he went to Chaotic Well City first. There was still a way out, so he didn't need to panic. He took the opportunity to bring more people and supplies out, which would be more beneficial to his future development. However, Yeshen didn't know that in order to cut off Yeshen's escape route, Yang Chendong actually sent out the most elite Wolf Fang special forces. This was a problem that had to be solved. If Yeshen knew about it, he wouldn't have wasted so much time in Chaotic Well City. After the sun hung high for a day, it finally set when night came, and the moon hung high in the sky, overlooking the earth. Dong dong dong. The town guard beat the drum 3 times and shouted, "The weather is dry, be careful of candles." The sound echoed in the quiet city that had already fallen asleep, like a piece of music that lulled people to sleep. Just as the 2 guards walked through a street and turned to another street, 6 black shadows quietly appeared behind them. Chapter 1196. They were dressed in black, and even their faces were smeared with black ink, making them look completely black. They hid in the corner of the street. Even if someone walked past them, it would be difficult for them to be discovered. This team of 6 people was the Wolf Fang Special Warfare Team. They quietly entered the city under the leadership of their captain, Skinny Monkey. With their vigorous skills and flexible bodies, they didn't attract the attention of the guards at all. They quietly came to the street 100 meters away from He Wei's mansion. No one spoke, and they communicated with hand signals. Skinny Monkey made a few special warfare movements in a row, telling his team members that the target was in front of them. The 6 people moved forward in 3 directions. One person was responsible for the arrangements on the left, one person was responsible for the security on the right, and the last person followed him to climb over the wall and open the gate from the inside. They moved forward like a cat, and even when they walked, they didn't make the slightest sound. After smoothly arriving in front of the gate, Skinny Monkey looked at his team member and made an okay gesture. The team member bent down and held his hands together. Skinny Monkey's body gently jumped onto the arm, and then the arm suddenly lifted, easily sending Skinny Monkey, who was less than 100 pounds, to the wall of the mansion. Everything was as smooth as flowing water. In fact, just this movement alone was practiced countless times, and it was only because of this that they could achieve such amazing results. The skinny monkey-like figure didn't immediately take action after jumping off the wall. Instead, he took out a night vision device from his bosom and put it on. After looking around and making sure that no one was paying attention to them, he gently jumped down and slowly opened the gate of the mansion. Then, he let the group of 6 into the mansion. It was midnight, and He Wei was sleeping soundly. In his dream, he had already left with Yeshen and went to another place to live, and he had conquered a large territory. At this time, he was preparing to return to the great Ming dynasty in high spirits and rebuild his glory. Suddenly, he felt an itch in front of his nose, waking him up from his sleep. He Wei narrowed his eyes and looked outside. He casually flipped over when he suddenly stopped, as if he had thought of something. He turned around and opened his eyes to see Skinny Monkey looking at him with a smile on his face. Just now, when He Wei was in a daze, he seemed to have seen a figure beside the bed. He wasn't sure if his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he thought that he was still dreaming. When He Wei turned around again, he was finally sure that everything he saw was real. Right now, there really was someone standing on his bed, staring at him fiercely. "You!" Out of instinct, He Wei wanted to shout, but as soon as the word "you" left his mouth, he felt a sharp pain in his lower abdomen. He had taken a heavy punch, and his entire body was bent over. Under the unbearable pain, He Wei found it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, a sharp dagger appeared and slashed his left arm. Blood immediately flowed out. He Wei, who had wanted to ease the pain, couldn't help but cry out in pain. "You can scream, but after that, your tongue will be gone. I guarantee that you won't be able to make a sound for the rest of your life. Do you believe me?" The smiling face got closer and closer, and a voice that made one's heart as cold as ice rang in his ears. He Wei, who was afraid of death, saw that his left arm was still bleeding. How could he not know that the other party was serious? He immediately said softly, "No, I won't scream anymore. Hero, please spare my life. Please spare my life." As expected, He Wei was a person who was afraid of death. He was afraid that the information he had was wrong, so he had to waste more time talking. Now that he had found his weakness, the rest of the matter would be much easier to handle. It's easy to avoid suffering. Do as I say. In the quiet night, orders were sent out from the residents, and the entire Yiji village started to move. Regardless of whether it was those who were on duty or those who were sleeping in their homes, they all received news from He Wei's personal guards that they were to gather immediately. The general had an order to pass down. Although many people were unhappy, and some were even cursing, they remembered what leader Yes Hen said before he left. If anyone dared to disobey General He Wei's orders, it was equivalent to disrespecting him. That person would be dismembered by 5 horses. Even though everyone was unhappy, they could only suppress their dissatisfaction and head towards the He residence. The candlelight in the He residence's meeting room wasn't very bright. Only He Wei's shadow could be seen clearly. Even the figures of the personal guards beside him couldn't be seen clearly. However, at this moment, no one cared so much. This was because just a moment ago, He Wei revealed a piece of news that they didn't expect. "Everyone, in a sand dune 10 miles away from our town, there are 2,000 5-star army cavalrymen hiding there. They are preparing to attack our Yiji village tomorrow morning." What? The 5-star army's cavalrymen? Did they really come? That's too fast. They only have 2,000 cavalrymen. They are underestimating us. Humph. Let them come. When the time comes, we will show them our power and let them know that our Yiji village is a land of death. That's right. Let's go back and prepare. We will definitely teach them a lesson tomorrow. The generals had different opinions, but their meaning was basically the same. They were all preparing their defense and waiting for the 5-star army to come and die. However, this wasn't the result that He Wei wanted to see. Seeing that no one was following his train of thought, he couldn't help but cough lightly and say, "What? Everyone is thinking about how to defend. Don't you know that the best defense is offense?" Offense? When this word came out from He Wei's mouth, it indeed shocked many people. Everyone looked at him as if they didn't know him. He Wei was a famous defense expert. Why did he suddenly change his mind and want to take the initiative to attack? How could He Wei not know what everyone was thinking when they looked at him? It was true that he didn't want to take the initiative to attack, but he couldn't control the fact that the personal guards beside him were disguised as Skinny Monkey and the others. He didn't forget how those personal guards who were supposed to protect him died tragically in front of him. Slash after slash, more than half of their flesh was cut off, but they were still alive. That feeling scared him so much that he didn't know how many times he peed. He Wei didn't want to end up like those people, so he had to complete the mission given to him by Skinny Monkey and the others. He could only continue. What? Do you really think that this general doesn't know how to attack? Let me tell you, there wasn't a suitable opportunity before. It's different now. The enemy only has 2,000 cavalrymen and they aren't prepared at all. This is the time for us to launch a sneak attack. If we do it well, those war horses will be ours and the prisoners will become our slaves. No matter how you look at it, it's worth a try. Naturally, if everyone doesn't have such thoughts, then just pretend that I didn't say anything. Tomorrow, we will just fight a defensive battle. At most, we will just watch the 5-star army escape from under our eyes after being defeated. When they heard that taking the initiative to attack would give them so much spoils of war, all the generals' eyes lit up with excitement. Everything was good about following He Wei. In the past, it wasn't like the Beiming army didn't try to attack them. However, They all failed and didn't pay much of a price. However, there was one point. Their spoils of war were too little. It could even be said that there was almost nothing. This was all because they only defended and never took the initiative to attack. Even when they saw the enemy retreat after failing to attack the city, they never took the initiative to attack. Thus, what benefits would there be for them? On the battlefield, if one wanted to develop and strengthen themselves, they had to continuously win battles. Not only could this increase the morale of the army, more importantly, it could also allow them to seize more resources and strengthen themselves through battles. Everyone was clear about this logic. As the saying goes, a horse won't get fat without feeding at night. For an army, the spoils of war after winning a battle would be so much that they could keep a lot of private goods. Now that the opportunity was placed in front of them, who would back off? General, he is right. Since the opportunity is right, I and my 1,000 cavalrymen will definitely participate in the battle. With the first general stepping forward, the others naturally wouldn't back off. Immediately, the 3,000 cavalrymen, including the leader of the 500 outlaws, all stepped forward, unwilling to be left behind. Everyone jumped forward. He Wei's face revealed a difficult expression as he said, "If all of you want to go out, then there must be people guarding the town." "Aye, General He, let's go and return quickly. It's just 10 miles of land. We have 3,500 men against 2,000 cavalrymen. Furthermore, we launched a surprise attack. We can end the battle in less than 2 hours. In such a short time, there won't be any problems with the town." "That's right. There aren't any other enemies nearby. It's just a few hours." "That's right. Anyway, whoever wants to stay is fine. We have to go out and fight." "Of course we have to go out too." Everyone took the initiative to express their desire to fight. He Wei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He could finally complete the mission given to him by Shou Ho. However, he still pretended to be in a difficult position and said, "Since that's the case, let's go and return quickly." "Haha, understood." The group of generals revealed looks of joy. Then, everyone quickly left the He residence and headed to the barracks. Everyone was afraid that if they were too slow, they wouldn't be able to reap the benefits. In less than an hour, all the soldiers in EG village had left the town. Other than some of the captains who stayed at home, there wasn't a single person who could leave. The 3,000 cavalrymen didn't even leave a single one behind. In the He residence, He Wei turned around and looked at Shou Ho, who was dressed like a bodyguard, and said, "Hero, I've done as you said. Can you spare my life?" "Haha, don't worry. As I said before, as long as you're obedient, you won't suffer." Hearing Shou Ho's words, He Wei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. However, Shou Ho's next sentence made him so angry that he almost fainted. "We won't let you suffer, but we will definitely take your life. Bugnam of Gojoseon said that we can show mercy to anyone, but not to traitors." You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.